United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Santucci, let you get started.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Commission, residents, staff. Over the course of the next 3 days, we'll be providing you with an overview of the proposed FY20 budget. I want to first recognize the city staff for all of their efforts on the budget so far. It has been it's a tremendous effort to do the budget and to get where we are today. I'd like to especially thank Nicole Giordano, Allison Teslia, Hugh Dunkley, our intern over there, Skender, for all the work that he has helped us with. And I'd like to start off by just saying that this budget, where you see the Vision 2020, is kind of representative of where we are today with this FY20 budget, because really the way I look at it is it's kind of a hard reset on the budget for many reasons, and we'll go into them as we go through these presentations. And I'll point those things out as we go along, but more importantly, understand that what's presented to you over the course of the next 3 days is not the final budget. There are still final revenue numbers that will come in and may adjust the budget a little bit, and we will adapt to those changes as we get those over the course of the next couple weeks. But for the most part, what's presented to you will be the final budget. And of course, we look to your comments and any recommendations that you may have, and of course, we'll adjust accordingly. I don't want to hold up the evening or any of these evenings too much. We have went ahead and made some improvements, I think, to the presentations themselves. So you'll notice this year, and if this is your first year, you'll notice that for the most part, the presentations are generally the same. The enterprise fund presentations may vary slightly just because of the nature of what they are, which is a business-like function that should support itself. And for those reasons, they are a little bit different than the general fund presentations, but all in all, they are very consistent from one to the other. You do have all the presentations that will be given tonight. You should have those in front of you so that you can take notes. And without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Allison, who's going to provide you with a brief overview of the budgeting process.
Good evening, I'm Allison Teslia, I'm the budget manager. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Heck, or this one.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Yes? Okay. Good evening, I'm Allison Teslia, I'm the budget manager. Tonight I'll be giving an overview of the budget process so you can have a better understanding of why we budget the way we do and some of the requirements that we must follow. The budget is a blueprint for the upcoming fiscal year. Our budget provides very specific pertinent information to its readers per the Government Finance Officers Association's best practices. The budget document is broken down into these major sections, which not only provide revenue and expenditure data, but it also gives an overview of the city's financial health. Oh, what's going on? No, it's not that. Where are we going? Okay. Gives an overview of the city's financial health, strategic priorities, staffing level information, and management's goals for the next year. In the transmittal letter section, the reader will gain an understanding of the city manager's vision, the critical issues facing the city, the recommended policies and procedural changes, as well as milestones that we reached during the current fiscal year. The introductory section provides a brief history of the city, an overview of its customers, its principal products and services, as well as its mission statement and philosophy. This section also includes a description of the budget process, the budget calendar, as well as miscellaneous statistical information. Similar to an individual with one checking account, a municipality categorizes its revenue and expenditures in separate funds. according to their specific purposes. In the budgetary data by fund section, each department and division within the fund is identified. Schedules of detailed revenue sources and expenditures are provided, and the goals and objectives, as well as performance measures of each department, are outlined. The debt administration section provides an overview of the city's debt policy. It gives a description of each outstanding bond issue, as well as the city's existing debt service requirements, including future minimum lease payments. This section also presents the calculation of the city's legally authorized debt limit and margin. The capital improvement summary provides a comprehensive listing and explanation of the capital needs of the city for the next 5 years and the impact of the capital improvements on the operating budget. The glossary provides a reader with listing of terms and acronyms that are frequently used in the budget. Okay. Per Florida state statutes, municipalities must adopt a balanced budget. A budget is balanced when all sources of funds equal all uses of funds. Total sources of funds include any funds left over from the previous year and new revenues expected to come in during the fiscal year. Per state statutes, most revenues are projected at 95% of the revenue estimates. Contracts and grants are typically budgeted at 100%, and the cash carryover from the previous year is also budgeted at 100%. Certain revenues can only be used for specific purposes. For example, gas taxes can only be used for transportation purposes. The fire assessment fee can only be used for fire safety, and stormwater fees can only be used for stormwater-related expenditures. Due to some of the restrictions given on these revenues, most cities elect to create special revenue funds or enterprise funds to account for those related revenues and expenses. Here we use special revenue funds for our water and sewer, building services, stormwater, solid waste, and insurance and risk-related revenues and expenditures. By pulling these specific costs from the general funds and establishing a dedicated revenue source to pay for these services, it frees up dollars in the general fund for other uses. Okay. Total use of funds include operating expenses such as personnel and expenditures used in regular operations, capital improvements, interfund transfers, and any reserves. Okay. Based on Florida state statutes, the city is required to adopt a budget each year and is bound to follow specific guidelines in order to meet TRIM compliance. We are given specific dates to complete tasks and forms that we must file with supporting documentation in order to prove that we are following the requirements, which are regulated by the Florida Department of Revenue. The property tax rate is referred to as a millage, which is the amount that property owners pay for every $1,000 of taxable value. Here's a breakdown of how a typical homesteaded property owner's tax dollars would be allocated here in the city. As you can see, the city only receives a portion of the homeowner's property taxes paid. The city's fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th, but the budget cycle never really ends. As soon as a new fiscal year begins, we start planning for the next year's budget. Typically in the late fall, we review the strategic goals and come up with a set of parameters for the upcoming fiscal year. These parameters include anything from anticipated changes in expenditures, staffing levels, tax rates, or regulatory requirements. In January, the Budget Office holds budget and CIP training for the departments and provide guidelines for the upcoming year. After budget training, the city manager and budget staff start holding meetings with departments to discuss various topics such as their performance measures, staffing needs, budget requests, and their alignment with their strategic priorities, which in turn help us determine the items that are included in the draft budget. In addition, we look at the revenues and expenditures to date and analyze any deviations that may need to be considered in next year's budget. The Budget Office calculates certain expenses for the departments. For example, pay projections are made for personal expenditures by using current staff salaries plus any proposed changes in staff and extrapolate the anticipated COLA and merit increases. We use similar personnel data when we're calculating the department's portion of the insurance services allocation, which is based on projected insurance costs and the number of full-time equivalents in each division. In June, the property appraiser releases the preliminary taxable property values, which assists the city in budgeting for its largest source of revenue, property taxes. Subsequently, a round of budget workshops are held with the City Commission where the departments are able to present and discuss their recommendations for the upcoming budget year. In the beginning of July, the property appraiser issues the final taxable property values, and the City Commission adopts the tentative tax rates based on these values. In mid-July, the state of Florida issues their projected shared revenues that cities and counties receive from them for funds related to sales tax, communication service taxes, and fuel taxes. Once the tentative property tax rate is set, budget staff is able to prepare the budget recommendation and capital improvement plan. Per the city charter requirements, the budget recommendation is provided to the City Commission no later than August 15th. In September, we hold 2 public meetings. So taxpayers are given the opportunity to make public statements to the City Commission about the budget and/or tax rates. The budget is officially adopted at the second public hearing and not long after the new fiscal year begins. So it just keeps going. So, and that's an overview of the budget process. Any questions? Okay.
Commissioner Preston?
Figure this out first. When you went over the beginning balance, and we're looking at the total source of funds, what I'd like to know, does that include grants and charities or not?
Grants for charities? For sources of?
Commissioner, are you speaking in terms of grants received by the city or grants given by the city?
Grants received by the city.
Go ahead.
Commissioner, for the most part, because of the unpredictability of grants and those types of sources of revenue, the city typically doesn't budget for grants with the exception of the Senior Services Fund, which will be forthcoming during this week's presentation. But most of the other grants, with the exception of CDBG and the Elder Affairs grants for senior services, we don't budget for grants because they're episodic and somewhat unpredictable in nature to budget for.
So in the total source of funds, that's not included?
It only with the exception of the Community Development Block Grant and the Active Aging, which is the Department of Elder Affairs, Older Americans Act grant.
CDBG and Active Aging.
Yes, okay. Elder Affairs grant, Department of Elder Affairs, from the Older American Acts.
Thank
funds.
you.
Yes.
I'll go to the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll be going over the strategic plan and performance measures for this year, be given by Nicole Giordano.
This isn't counting towards my time. It's taking a second before. Okay. Oh, okay. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Nicole Giordano, Program and Innovation Manager. Tonight, I will be providing an update on the fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19 strategic action plans, strategic initiative reporting, and performance measure tracking. So the fiscal year 18 action plans included coastal and waterway management, the education initiative, the central core, and parks and recreation capital improvements. Coastal and waterway focuses on the conservation and preservation of our local waterways. Sustainable management is obtaining this through the projects the vessel exclusion and the artificial reef. That vessel exclusion is near completion with only one more buoy to be installed. And the artificial reef RFP was issued in January. Staff anticipates a construction start date in the summer of this year. The education initiative focuses and promotes quality education and encourages community involvement. Community development successfully held their second year of Reading Pals and TutorMate. 23 city employees participated in that program. The program does have an annual cost to the department at $22,000 with the recent increase of the participating schools. To date, staff has participated in 25 meetings, events, and partnerships with the local schools. The central core is the development of Pioneer Grove and the DBR zoning districts. The Planning and Development Services Department spent $30,000 as part of the Phase 3 infrastructure plan for Pioneer Grove. Staff is working with Environmental Services to retain a consultant. Parks and Rec capital improvements focuses on adding park space to increase the quality of life through recreational activities. The Brand-Hilda Richardson Knowles Memorial and Historical Park is currently under construction. The project's moving quickly to complete under the grant deadline. The fiscal year 19 action plans included training and employee development, retail attractions, renewable energy, and permitting and plan review. Training and employee development focuses on employees through a variety of training and educational methods. The HR department held on-site supervision and government training for 25 employees. They've elicited feedback to finalize the safety training strategy, with trainings available to the city at no cost. Training is an annual cost that varies dependent on the courses. Retail attractions focuses on the enhancement of retail services citywide. Economic development has entered into a contract with Retail Strategies to begin retail recruitment in the city. Renewable energy focuses on the reduction of energy consumption to reduce annual costs for usage. Sustainable management has presented performance-based contracting to obtain this goal. This project is currently on hold. While that $10 million does seem daunting, there is a total cost guaranteed savings of $15 million over the 17-year project life. Permitting and plan review is to streamline and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the permitting process. Planning and zoning has purchased the GovEasy software to obtain this goal. There is an annual cost of that software as well at $13,000. Strategic initiative reporting. In February, the city expanded the financial transparency tool, also known as OpenGov, to add strategic initiative reporting and performance measure tracking. This did increase the budget for the budget and performance division. So what you're seeing here isn't actually Deerfield's. This is an example from OpenGov. Ours is currently not live. We are working on that, and it will be up by the end of this year. But if you were comparing this to Deerfield, this would just be an overview of the strategic plan in its entirety. Deerfield has 3 strategic priorities with directional statements under each, and then action plans that are submitted by staff, like the ones that I reported. So on this slide, if I was comparing this to Deerfield, your economic health would be your strategic priority, with business attraction and retention being the action plan. Staff could go directly in there, add updates, add project costs, and give an overview of how they're meeting that strategic priority. The tool allows us to track the metrics of our action plans, linking them back to the budget, allowing the city to track budget dollars by initiative and not just department. Right now, this is done through Excel and PDF reporting. This tool will allow direct data entry from the departments, increasing accountability and efficiency. The use of the reporting system was actually suggested by our consultant when we launched the strategic plan in 2018. Performance measure reporting. As requested at the budget workshops last year, staff has been reporting quarterly on the performance measures. Again, right now, this is done through Excel and PDF reporting. But I am happy to report that as of this morning, the Department of Active Aging Performance Measures was launched in the OpenGov portal. This is what it would give you an idea what that looks like. OpenGov allows the city to further establish their performance planning for the year. It communicates objectives and it sets an actionable plan to guide the department to achieve their fiscal year performance measures. Again, this is direct data entry by the departments. By the end of this fiscal year, all of the departments will be on the OpenGov portal with their targeted projections for fiscal year 20. Fiscal year 20 goals are to maximize the use of the OpenGov platform, to increase citizen engagement, track the strategic initiatives, and improve accountability of performance measures, to increase department non-financial reporting. This would be done through project mapping of the city, of citywide, and with data that's not captured in the performance measures, but are part of the department's operations. And then in terms of the strategic plan, have the initiative tracking online again by the end of the year, and reevaluate and expand the strategic priorities with the commission, and update the plan as it's nearing its 5-year term in 2021. Did you have any questions?
Commissioner Preston?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I'm just going to say this to staff. If you, I don't know about anybody else here, but I'm extremely challenged to follow you because this writing is so little, so small. I'm serious. I can hear and see what's going on, but very, very difficult to follow, and then at the same time have some degree of questioning of things that you might want to talk about. I know I have x-ray vision, but it's being challenged right now.
Commissioner, we'd be happy to provide you with the full page slides for tomorrow, so that, if that'd make it easier for you.
Thank you.
I have a question. So regarding OpenGov, and it was one of our strategic goals to get this launched this year, correct?
I'm sorry, the OpenGov, the strategic goals is?
Wasn't one of our goals is to have the OpenGov application fully functioning by the end of the?
So yes, these are different modules though. We did in April, we integrated the financial side of it. So what was presented at the at that commission meeting was the integration when we changed the back end, the ERP system. We had to reintegrate it now from, I don't know what the other one was called, I'm sorry, but with the current one that we have now. So that was what was done, yes. And then so now these are two additional modules within OpenGov with the intent to have the performance measures done by October and the initiatives done by December.
So the first one to launch is the active aging one that we have there?
Yes, that was really just to get the most bang for our buck. A lot of their performance measures are in ratios, which was actually kind of a challenge for the vendor. So it was figuring out how to get that information portrayed in a performance measure. So that's why they were selected first.
Can you go back to that slide? Is that possible?
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Okay. It would be slide number 7. So, and I'll ask a general question on this, and it will pertain to that slide that's coming up.
Okay.
When we have these performance measure data, we have that up there, and we can see whether, it gives us the status of where we're at in achieving our goal. A portion of that in there showed, and there it is. So, based on this, the number of participants were above target. How much funding has been received needs focus, and then we're on target with the number of hours for health and wellness services. Based on this, I'm assuming that these performance measures, should we reach them or not be able to reach them, this is going to affect how much we budget for that department. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually I guess in terms of the grant funding on that, it's kind of an optical illusion. The way that I had to do it was I had to take their fiscal year projection and divide it by quarter, where if I had done it as an annual, it would have set the measure really hard and would have shown that they hadn't met it at all. But with it being over in quarter one, but like lower than the target in two, they are actually on track. But it's hard to display that with it broken down by quarter. So what I've tried to do is go through and divide their annual by 4.
So my point is, if we take these performance measures and apply this to any department, we just happen to have this right here, using this module and this view, and maybe the question's more for Mr. Santucci, but I think it's also for you, Ms. Giordano, but should we see a department that's not able to hit their goals, obviously we shouldn't be funding them to the level that we are, or maybe it might be a need for more funding depending on what it is for it reaching its goal. I'm trying to figure out, how do you apply this to how we do our budget process?
Sure, absolutely. I think, a lot of the performance measures for the departments need to relate directly to the programs and the services that they provide, right? So when you see a department who's performing well, they're hitting their targets, and they're using the appropriate funding that is in relationship to those services and those programs, great, we know we've got a good match. I think that's what you're getting at. And then when they're not, if they're underperforming, they're not hitting their targets, then again, you see that the dollars that have been allocated in the budget for those programs and services, they're not meeting that target either, then yes, obviously that's where you can match it up and say, yeah, we're overfunding this particular program or service.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hudak?
If you could go back to slide, I guess it would be 2 or 3, if you could just explain to me those priorities and what does H1 and 3.1 and all of that mean?
So that is actually our strategic plan in its entirety. So 1 would be your strategic priority. H would be your directional statement. So if you went through the plan and went 1H, that's the directional statement that it applies to. So 1H is to invest in education and seek ways to partner with school systems. Oh, well, that one was with the school. But really, the overview of that was to invest in education, and we're investing in education with the employee development.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Dunkley and I will be going over revenue forecasts as well as the major initiatives and changes for fiscal year 20.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the City Commission, good evening. And thank you for enabling us to present to you our financial plan for the upcoming fiscal year. Before we jump into the minutia of next year's budget, I would like to first, rather for us to take a look at the overall fiscal health of the city. Whenever we think of a city's fiscal health, one particular term comes to mind, and that term is fund balance. If we were to look at our neighbors and north and south of us, fund balance, more than any other number, represents the lifeblood of what the city is able to do in the very near-term future. And it's tantamount to a savings account for an individual. The city's total fund balance at the end of last fiscal year, that is fiscal 2018, was $27 million. And in the upcoming slides, I'll make some distinction. This apparently is not, let me grab that. Just want us to be on the same page, if just to forgive us for a moment.
Just tell them next slide. Tell me when to go to the next slide.
Yeah, you could stay on that slide. So in the upcoming slides, okay, thanks. Oh, that's fine. So what I'll be doing in the upcoming slide is essentially making some distinctions between the various classes of fund balance and to indicate to you what each represents. However, before I delve into those particular slides, I would like to take a look at some of the other measures of fiscal fitness for our city. As indicated on this slide, the city currently has a AA rating for its general obligation bonds from our two of the major credit rating agencies. That's significant because when you look at a city's total, rather, fiscal fitness, you look at their ability to borrow money, which is called their debt capacity, and their ability to raise revenue, which is their revenue capacity, which we'll be touching upon. And the revenue capacity speaks to how do we derive revenue. As Ms. Teslia indicated, 52% of our major revenue source for the general fund is our ad valorem tax. And so therefore, we look at our tax base as a means of how much can we raise in revenue to fund operations. But from a general standpoint, the city has a relatively low debt burden. Our total debt limit is 2% of our total assessed value. To put that into perspective, our total assessed value is $8.5 billion. 2% of that, hopefully the math checks out, is $170 million. At the end of fiscal 2018, we only had $15 million of bonded debt outstanding. That does not even represent 10% of our total debt limit. There are several reasons for that, but it just goes to show that the city has a very low debt limit. But if we check off the list, we have a healthy fund balance, strong credit ratings, low debt burden. But what do we turn our sights to next? And we have to start turning our attention to some of our other needs. One such need is our ability to fund needed capital improvements. We have an estimated $6.8 million for our 5-year CIP just for the general fund alone. That's not even taking into consideration the fact that we have $4.8 million for needed fire department vehicles and equipment that's not included in the $6.8 million figure. Next slide. So I mentioned that I would kind of look at the various classes of fund balance. As its name implies, assigned represents, or let's start from the top. Non-spendable primarily represents inventory of supplies and materials on hand. That's non-spendable because we cannot convert that into cash unless we sell it, which those are consumable items. Assigned, however, represents an action by the commission to set aside funds, such as emergency reserves for hurricanes and things of that nature, that we'll be utilizing those funds for in the very near future. Another component of assigned is outstanding purchase orders at the end of the year. And unassigned, which is the last component and the largest of the total fund balance, is unencumbered funds that the commission may use at its own discretion for budgetary or for other reasons. And the chart is pretty self-explanatory. We've had an upward slope over the years, and the city is at its strongest point than any other point in recent memory. We've exceeded the 15% goal. We're currently at 17% of our total general fund expenditures in terms of meeting our fund balance percentage. The ad valorem tax history, you can go to the next slide, it's sloping upward as to be expected. Our property values have increased, and over the years, we've kind of, the ad valorem tax revenues have been in lockstep with that. So how do we calculate our ad valorem tax revenues? The ad valorem tax revenues is typically budgeted at 95% of total tax collections. And why 95%? It's not only is it required by law, but the 95% represents two numbers. The first is the 4% discount that the taxpayers may avail themselves of beginning in November of each year. And then we have an additional 1% for errors, insolvencies, value adjustment board challenges and things of that nature. So when we look at the overall tax collections, we say, well, how do we get from point A to point B? And part of that is attributable to the increase in the taxable values of property. This year, citywide, we had a 6.84, if you could, yes, thanks. So this year we had a 6.84% increase in the taxable value of property. And the CRA, however, had a 4% increase in terms of overall increase in its taxable value.
And the interesting thing about this slide is this is the first year since the recession that the city has outpaced the CRA in tax tax value increase. So what does this indicate? Nothing at this point. This is the first year that it's occurred. Should it continue to happen, it obviously becomes a trend and something for the city commission to consider and for staff to analyze to provide additional information to the city. But it's just, it's a positive indication at this point for the city as a whole to show that our economic development efforts are starting to pay off. And the developments that are coming online here in the city are coming onto the tax rolls and having a positive impact on the city. So,
next slide. Likewise, our millage rate has been relatively stable over the years. And if just to point you to the debt millage, the debt millage is a mere reflection of the fact that we have a very, very low debt burden overall. And the total millage over the years has been relatively constant. It is our hope and we're proposing a slight decrease in the millage for the upcoming year, and we have incorporated that into our total revenue estimate. So what's in store for next year? Yes.
Thank you. Just linger there for a moment.
Okay.
Commissioner Preston pointed out, it's very difficult for us to read what we have here. I just want to look at some of these numbers for a moment, if that's all right. Does anyone else need to see this longer? Yes. Commissioner Drosky?
I thought, I could be wrong, I heard you say that there was a slight increase that you're proposing, but the numbers show decrease.
It's a slight decrease.
Okay,
Yes,
just-
slight decrease.
Okay. Sure. Go right ahead.
Didn't want to alarm the crowd.
If,
Apologize for that.
and I'm not, I have a quick question, Mr. Dudley. If you go back to slide 4, yeah, go backwards. Keep going. There we go. And I'm not sure if this is the forum to ask this, but I'm going to anyway. So in 2000, is this the one I wanted? No. Yeah, this will work. So in 2013, our ad valorem taxes was 26 million, and now we're projecting it at 41 million. That's an increase of $15 million. And we still don't have any money in our capital budget in order to do anything for our firehouses or our BSO places. And I'm just curious where all the money's going, because our debt is low, which is tremendous. But we were able to afford this stuff in 2013 as far as operating the city. And my simple mind says, okay, we got $15 million more now than we did in 2013. Why are we still in the same boat?
I'd be happy to answer that for you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. At the end of the day, it's the cost of providing the services have increased. And when you talk about half of your general fund budget being apportioned mainly to public safety, and the cost increases that we see year to year, although contained, do increase every year at a rate of approximately, historically, between 3% and 4%. You'll see a little bit different this year, a much higher increase, and we'll go into that when we go into those presentations. So when you're talking about half of your general fund with a 3 to 4% increase year after year, that's a substantial amount of money on the increase. Insurance costs have increased substantially over the past 5 years, and that's not something that only the City of Deerfield Beach has experienced, but all municipalities and generally all businesses as well. So those costs have been increasing, and so it really just it's an increase in all the costs that we have been able to keep pace with over these years.
Are we going to be able to see a slide that shows how much these costs have increased over these 5-6 years? Because I think that's important information.
We have that information. I don't have a slide in here that shows the cost increases for, what is being presented as approximately $185 million budget. Just the amount of departments and line items and those sorts of things. I'm not really sure what level of detail you're looking for in a 5-year analysis, but I'd be happy to provide that information to you. We do have some slides in here that will explain to you what those costs are this year, and we have some comparable slides from last year as well.
Just for clarification, this is tax revenue, this is not taxable value?
Tax revenue.
It's tax revenue, so this is actually money brought in.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Preston?
But that tax revenue is an estimate, correct?
It's an estimate. The last 2 years are estimates.
So my question would be, when you start looking at your spend plans, then that's a guesstimate too, correct?
A budget for a year that hasn't occurred, yes, by some degree, is an estimation, both in terms of expenditures and revenues. And until such time as we have completed that fiscal year and all the expenditures have come in and all the revenues have come in, it is a guide. It is a strategic tool for the city and for the commission to guide the administration on how we are to operate and what programs, services, initiatives the commission would like to see. But at the end of the day, yes, it is an estimation of the expenditures and revenues to be realized in any given fiscal year.
So in real numbers, how do we deal with, we look at a guesstimate of here's what we'd like to do, and we know how much money that we have coming, estimated to come in. What happens when we were expecting a certain amount and that doesn't happen? How does that affect the spend plans that we have already budgeted for?
Sure, it can happen one of two ways, right? We could expend more than we anticipated and it could exceed the revenue amount, or conversely, we could spend less than what the actual revenues are. So historically, over the past several years, when we have had expenditures less than the actual revenues, we have contributed that to the fund balance to grow the fund balance. In a year where you have expenditures that exceed the actual revenues, you would look towards that fund balance to pick up the difference.
Okay. But let me ask you this. So that if we were off in what revenues that we thought we would get and we don't get, does that affect other parts of the budget? In other words, if we get off on one, does it affect just one project, or could it affect the budget overall, depending on how much we were expecting versus how much we get?
And that's exactly it. Depending on that delta, we would need to make budgetary decisions that would either impact a particular project, or a service, or, like I said, you'd look towards the fund balance to make up the difference.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Dunkley. Sorry.
So the city manager is going to go over this slide that indicates FY20.
I think there was one slide before that we may have missed. My apologies.
For the millage rate, which we've...
The major budget transparency initiative.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
what he's going to go over.
Okay.
So there's several things that we have changed with this FY20 budget, and all of what you're going to see here includes a proposed 1/8 millage reduction, which was not an easy task to accomplish, and I give credit to the staff for really digging deep into their budgets and looking at where they're spending and how they're spending and making the appropriate cuts to make all of this happen. But one of the hardest things that we had to do was to create a building fund and remove that from the general fund. And what that does, it demonstrates a heightened degree of transparency and compliance with the state laws. And not that we weren't obviously complying with the state laws before, but when you take the building fund, which is supposed to be like most separate funds, like an enterprise fund, self-sustaining, this is a much more transparent way to provide the numbers in the budget and to the people on how to do that. And so really what this amounts to is a one-time hit to the general fund that we won't have to deal with again, but it did come at a cost in terms of revenues to the general fund this year, and one that we were able to deal with. And this was something that had to be done sooner or later, and from my perspective, I wanted to do it sooner than later. We're also going to incorporate a debt service fund into the adopted budget, because there seems to be a little misconception about how debt service is applied to the budget, and how it is incorporated into the budget. And so this will also create a higher degree of transparency in the budget for the City Commission and the residents as well. We've also created a computer replacement program prior to FY20 this year. In fact, every department budgets separately in their own budgets for the computers that they need. And what that does is it removes a lot of the oversight from the Department of Information Technology Services to manage their computers that are out there. It does not allow us to gain economies of scale through purchasing in bulk, and it provides for a more strategic deployment of new computers when they do come in for information technology services. And lastly, it allows them to schedule out and budget appropriately for the replacement of computer devices. And so that has been removed from the various departments and placed into central services, and you'll see the increases to central services as a result of that. Additionally, we made some adjustments in the way in which certain personnel services, in other words, people or staff, are accounted for in the budget. For instance, if you have an employee who solely, a general fund employee, like in information technology, and I use that example because you're going to, again, see that as we move forward. If you have employees working in information technology services that solely work in the field of, or in the fund of utilities, they're doing GIS work for utility infrastructure. Previously, what we would do is we would allocate the entire salary to the utility fund. Okay? In some cases, we still do those sorts of things, but for ITS, a lot of salaries were allocated to utilities. And what we did instead is we moved all of them back into the ITS budget so you can actually see the cost of personnel services for information technology services, but we managed that through a very ordinary and common and practical and legal thing of administrative charges. So what that is every enterprise fund relies on the general fund for services, human resources, information technology services, procurement, finance, the city clerk, you name it, right? So there is a administrative fee that is that comes to the general fund from the utility funds, or excuse me, from the enterprise funds to pay for those services. And that's how we're accounting for most of it now at this point. And so it's just a different change in the way that we show these things, but again, it provides a little bit more transparency into the true costs of things like personnel. And I hope I explained that to make sense. And if you have any questions, of course, let me know. This year, I've got to give a lot of credit to Allison for really pressing on the departments to create what I believe is probably the truest 5-year capital budget that this city has had in a very long time. Will get more accurate. You got to remember, this is the first year that we actually did it using an entirely new system. So all of the capital projects from a 5-year projection had to be done in 1 year. Next year we'll have all the data in there, and it's just a matter of adding and refining, and then adding and refining. So we'll get better as time goes on. But as you can see, we were able to at least report in this year, just as we did earlier, we got about a $6.8 million 5-year capital projection for general fund projects, and that does not include heavy vehicle and equipment purchases, and it does not include large infrastructure projects like buildings, okay? So that's like soft capital construction. And then lastly, we abandoned the internal logistics management department. Previously, that department was made up of purchasing and contract administration, as well as construction and facilities management. Although those two departments work a lot together, they're functionally not compatible, and so we moved construction and facilities management into environmental services, where the rest of the engineers live, as well as most of the technical staff, like facilities technicians, plumbers, electricians, HVAC techs, those types of workers and technical ability live there as well. And the idea there is that we can create some cross-functional assistance when needed, and that we're actually already starting to see that as we've kind of been testing that. And then, of course, with purchasing, it doesn't make sense, obviously, to house one division in a sole department. And so I strategically have placed them into the Budget and Performance Management Department, as many will have different opinions of where purchasing fits within an organization. You could probably guess that I believe that they are a strategic component of any government, and so they are suited to be with budget. And so that was a big change that we made this year. Those are all the transparency initiatives. Let's go ahead and move on.
So as we look at the total estimated budget for the general fund, there will be a slight decrease from the previous years. But before we look at what the decrease, what's comprised of the decrease, the overall revenue for the general fund is depicted on this slide. Hopefully it's the correct slide. So as reflected here, 52% of the revenues are from taxes. And so what our hope is, as we had entertained the other evening, last week, about the fire assessment fee, the overall goal of budgeting in especially for revenues is that those recipients of the services, of governmental services, should pay for those services. So in the foreseeable future, we're hoping to shift some of the burden from the taxes and shift it over to the other user fees, since they're the recipients of the city's services as well. So overall, the bulk of our revenue sources are from taxes. Then we have assessment, permits, and fees, and so forth. The total decrease this year was almost $1 million from the total budget of the previous year. So we're going from $109.5 million to $108.6 million. Next. So what are some of the major changes in revenue? As I mentioned earlier, we did see an uptick in the ad valorem revenues. That represents about I think it's a 4% increase there in revenue. The fire assessment fee item was brought before you at the last commission meeting, and we had a fee adjustment there to recognize a fee that would be more reflective of the services that are offered. There's some other miscellaneous changes in the revenue sources. As indicated earlier, we're pulling out the building fund services out of the general fund to account for that in a separate fund. So the overall decrease in the general fund budget is that of $0.9 million. Next slide.
In terms of major expenditures, you can see, as I talked about earlier, that in central services, they're seeing a $2.3 million increase, but at the same time, internal logistics management is seeing almost a compatible decrease, and that is the utility bills, electric and water. We pulled that out of internal logistics management budget and put those into central services. Financial services is seeing about a $1.4 million increase, generally related to the implementation or the need for the new ERP system, which we have talked at length about. Planning and development services is, the decrease there is a result of pulling the building department out of planning and development services. Information technology services increase is generally related to the ERP system. Law enforcement has a $1.7 million increase, although that's mainly the P25 compliancy requirements, the radio systems that we have to have, and they'll show more of what that $1.7 million increase when they get a chance to present their budget to you. Fire rescue as well, they have the P25 compliancy requirements, which are actually more expensive than the law enforcement ones, as they also have the alerting system within the fire stations to deal with. They also have some large capital expenditures this year in terms of an engine and one ambulance. We worked very hard to lower Parks and Recreation's budget this year to get them more in line with what they've actually been spending year to year. And then the debt service, non-departmental, has gone down 1.8 million. I'll let Hugh in just a second talk a little bit more in detail about those changes, and then we had some other miscellaneous changes, which amount to the $0.9 million decrease in the general fund budget overall. But if you could just speak to the debt service real quick, Hugh.
So when we issued the 2018 revenue bond, the oft-discussed topic of the capitalized interest, you're now beginning to see the fruits of that labor there, where we promised and now we're delivering the capitalized interest. We're beginning to draw on the capitalized interest fund, and so you'll see a likewise decrease in the debt service. Another reason for the decrease in debt service is that we had budgeted for a larger lease principal and interest payment, which we have not had to undertake this year because we have put off the lease purchase transaction until later on in the year.
The primary reason for that is that we just don't have enough capital to lease purchase and make it marketable and attractive to the banks. So we're going to take 2 years worth and put it together to get a lower interest rate. And so we plan on doing that towards the end of this year or early next year. And then these are some of the actual, we talked previously about the major expenditure changes. These are the actual
Going with the 4.3 million.
What's that? Your larger slides, by the way, are getting printed as we speak if you have not received them yet. We talked about the P25 compliancy, and the first year cost is 0.8 million. These costs are spread out over 3 years. Next year will be almost as just about the same amount of the 1.8, and then the third year will be lower than this because we will have paid for the alerting system by then, but we'll still have the actual P25 radios to pay for. There's an increase in the fire pension contribution because of updated mortality tables from the actuarial study that was recently conducted. Yes.
The cost for the P25, I see it's just for fire rescue, but I believe BSO has to pay for that as well.
You know what? I apologize. You are correct. That 1.8 is not just fire rescue. That is the Broward Sheriff's Office. The 0.8 includes law enforcement and fire rescue. I apologize for that. You are correct. We have the purchase of the fire apparatus that I spoke of, which would be 1 engine and 1 rescue. The information technology staffing allocation to the general fund, which we discussed, is not an addition. We're not getting any more staff. We're just allocating them a little bit differently. Then we have the new ERP system this coming fiscal year at next year's cost being at $500,000 out of the general fund. That is a shared cost with the enterprise fund, so there is a contribution by them as well. And then we have capital expenditures that equal $1 million, and we'll go into those as we get into the construction and facilities management budget throughout the course of the next couple of days, which equals a total of $4.3 million.
So aside from the general fund, in the CAFR, when you look at the CAFR, we have what you call major funds. And the general fund is always a major fund. And the enterprise funds, those funds are major in that they provide quite a bit of services that the recipients must pay a fee. There are three major enterprise funds. We have water and sewer, stormwater, solid waste. And what distinguishes the enterprise fund from the general fund? And it's primarily one thing. The enterprise funds operate like regular businesses. And it's a slight caveat, though. They don't have shareholders. However, we could view the citizens as the shareholders. But the enterprise funds, we're not necessarily trying to earn a profit. What we're trying to do, on the other end, is to recover the costs of providing services through user fees. And that's the main distinction between, say, a Fortune 500 company and our enterprise funds, is that we would like to recover the costs of providing services and to at least look towards the future, whether we want to have a capital replacement plan or things of that nature. But looking at the next slide, revenue and expense history for the general fund, bear with me, for the enterprise funds, it's kind of, if you look at all the years through fiscal 15, either the revenues have exceeded the expenses or they're relatively equal. But after fiscal 15, you see the expenses, which is the gray shaded area, it starts to outpace the revenue. And what that points to is that we have to start looking at our user fee, our user rates. The water and sewer rates have not been changed since March of 2008. The solid waste enterprise fund rates were changed in fiscal 2015. So that's the overall situation there with our enterprise fund, is that we're looking to recover the costs of providing services. And one quick way of doing so is we simply compare the revenues and the expenses. Next slide. Just to kind of, Commissioner Udall?
Sorry, another question. The solid waste costs, is that reflective of the increase of costs in recyclables, or is that included or not?
Yes, so yes, that's definitely a contributing factor for the reason why our expenditures are more than our revenues at this point. And when we get to solid waste, they're going to go into much more detail about their fund than what we have in this presentation.
Yeah, I have a question. You say we don't look at this like a business, like a Fortune 500 company. Our budget is around 200 million. Why shouldn't we operate more like a business?
I suppose, not to mischaracterize my statement, we operate like a business. However, with a Fortune 500 company, they're trying to increase the return on equity for the shareholders. So if you invest into a GE Capital stock, you're hoping to increase your, at the end of the day, you want more than what you put in. So the company has to grow profit. So they have to show what they call retained earnings. They have to show the increase in their profits over the years for the shareholders. That's not the city's intent. We merely want to show that our revenues equal our expenses. Like if you take a Microsoft, they're going to want to have their revenues far in excess of their expenses so they could take the difference and give back to their shareholders in the form of dividends and things of that nature. So the Fortune 500 company, their motive is that of a profit motive. Ours is merely to recover our costs of providing services.
Let me ask this. If we did create more money than we spend, our shareholders are our constituents who live here. We would return money by lowering the millage rate if we were successful in how we spend our money. So wouldn't that be similar?
So we need to obviously have a balanced budget where expenditures equal revenues, but we also need to have healthy reserves. And the charges for service and the enterprise funds need to be appropriate for the cost of those services. That speaks to the revenue slide that we showed you earlier with the pie chart, where approximately half of the revenues come from ad valorem taxes, and a way in which we can maintain the ad valorem or the millage rate and or lower it would be to take a hard look at the other side of that pie chart, the other revenue sources, the user fees and things of that sort, to analyze them to see if they're appropriate for the services that are provided to the people who are using those services.
Okay.
So just in the interest of time, the economic indicators, what we do each year is we give you a 10,000-foot view of what some of the economic variables that affect the cities. And so when we speak of economic indicators, we look at some major variables, one of which is most of us know is unemployment rates. The unemployment rate is relatively low, as depicted here. Another statistic that we look at is consumer confidence. And the University of Florida, they have a consumer confidence index for the state as a whole. And that has decreased. And like the rest of the nation, there is some amount of nervousness about economic disruptions and uncertainties brought about by the escalating trade war with China and the new tariff threat with Mexico. But overall, other economic variables are sound. Unemployment rate, we have the increase in consumer spending. So we have the median sales price of single-family homes have increased. So when we look at the other
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, turn those back on, please. Can we still see the slide, the present? Okay, good. All right.
So, next slide. So we look at the other. Okay. So basically, the median sales price of single-family home, it kind of gives us the demand, how much people are driving up the price for homes, and it speaks to their ability to acquire a major capital. This typically represents the most expensive purchase for most individuals. So therefore, it's pointing towards their ability to their purchasing power. Next slide. The other economic indicators is that we look at the number of closed sales. It's increasing as well in lockstep with the median sales price. The CPI index is we would consider it somewhat mild. What that represents is how much inflation is in the economy. If the inflation is considered very mild, and so therefore you hear a lot of talk about the Feds wanting to decrease the interest rate. What that means is that they're they want to fuel people to borrow more, to spend more, and hence increase the CPI index. It measures how much demand for goods and services. So right now it's relatively, it's low at 1.5%. When we look at the average wage of the South Florida region, it's $48,000, and that's roughly across the Tri-County area. Another statistic that we look at is provided by the Florida Department of Revenue, is how much retail sales have we had in the past year, and it's $9.6 billion. Just to put a quick caveat, the past year is 2017. The state usually lags behind in providing these data, but it's a very good litmus for where the economy stands. Next slide. Okay.
All right, now on this last slide, this is just to show you the, is there, can you go back, please? It's skipping a slide, but I'll just speak to it. The average assessed value in 2019 for a single-family home is $186,467, and the county average is $265,891. There was a 6.4% increase for home values from last year to this year of 6.4%, and there was a Broward County average increase of 5.3. So we have the 10th lowest assessed value in the county. And I just asked Hugh to take a look. I said, you know, Hugh, if we were at the average of that 265,000, how much additional ad valorem tax would that be to the city just for single-family homes? And that would be approximately $7 million in additional ad valorem tax revenue if we were at the average, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I think we can give ourselves kudos because even though we are the 10th lowest assessed value in the county, we're about at the midpoint for our millage rate. And so that speaks to, our ability to maintain fiscally prudent. And that's all we have on these slides. We're going to get into the department's budgets unless there are any questions.
Not
Okay.
seeing any move forward.
Thank you. And next we have Information Technology Services. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. We'll let Hugh show his budget first, I guess.
Of course, we don't have that one.
I'll bring you up.
So Mayor, Commissioner, Vice Mayor, you might have received a handout with financial services, and I'm not going to belabor much of your time. I'll go over some of our fiscal 19 achievements to date, fiscal 20 goals, then I'll look at our operating budget, and then look at beyond fiscal 20. Okay. Just to make sure that, so in fiscal 19, we had some goals, and what we did was we took a hard look at the present time and said, well, where do we stand? And quite a bit, some we implemented early, such as the stormwater bills. Others we still have in process. As I will go down and quickly go over each, we implemented lockbox processing for utility customers, and what that did was significantly decrease the mail traffic in City Hall. We used to have two full-time cashiers. We now have 1.5 full-time equivalent, and so it is our hope to even further decrease the mail traffic by implementing what they call e-box. If you have bill pay on your bank, for your bank account, you will see when you go to sign up for bill pay, it asks certain preferred vendors, the funds are transferred electronically. And so the e-box, what that does, instead of sending an actual check to the vendor, they will send the funds electronically to the vendor. So what that does, it decreases the city's ability to, it increases our investable funds, and it decreases the amount of paper items that the lockbox processor have to utilize. We implemented stormwater billing, as I indicated earlier, and the thing with stormwater billing is that we had projected an even greater amount of costs, primarily as a result of postage and so forth. But as you will see in the upcoming slides, the costs were significantly less. The transition of stormwater bills to the tax bills, that has some obvious benefits and some costs. And what we have done is, it was the direction it was the conventional wisdom to postpone that for the time being. We're currently in the process of implementing what they call remote deposit capture for outlying departments. We take one particular department, sustainable management, the employees would have to transport the cash and check items over to central finance for deposit each and every day. What they'll be doing in the very near future is to upload their checks to the bank deposit portal, and so the city will get automatic credit for it the following business day. And towards the end of this year, it is our hope to at least put out the bid for IVR, and which right now is highly dependent upon our new financial reporting system. But we're going to move forward and put out our bid for what they call the interactive voice response system. And what that is when you call into your to the line, the toll-free line, you'll be able to pay your bills by phone, get interactive responses for account balances, recent payments, and so forth. And that we feel will increase the customer experience. Last but not least, we are in the process of implementing what they call Wells Fargo Safe Vantage for currency. And so what that is we're already uploading our checks. We don't physically take our checks to the bank. We scan the checks in, and we get credit the following business day for all of our check items. And so what then do we do with the currency? We have an armored car pickup to come and transport the currency to West Palm, to the money center for deposit. What we're hoping to do is they'll provide us with a safe that will indicate the amount that's deposited. We'll get automatic credit for the currency, and then once a week, the armored carrier will come and pick up those funds. And the main point of this, it will decrease the amount of pickups by the armored carrier, and also to increase our availability of funds. Next slide. Our fiscal 20 goals, we hope to implement phase 1 of our ERP. Phase 1 typically is the general ledger, accounts payable, purchasing, and payroll will be at the tail end of that, but we're hoping to implement these systems which will enable us to better report on our finances. I would be the first to tell you that we've had a significant amount of teeth gnashing over what we call one solution, and it is not been as robust a financial reporting package as we had first thought. The next goal is to complete the conversion of the IVR, which I mentioned earlier. We'd like to implement upfront billing of fire inspection fees, and we'd like to update our debt management policy. And what the SEC Rule 15C212 is, despite the technical jargon, it simply means that the city has to report on all of the loans that we have. Currently, the SEC has what they call post-compliance reporting. So if we issue a bond like we just did in 2018, each March we have to tell them how much money did the city take in, how much we have to do calculations to make sure that the total amount of revenues taken in is it meets or exceeds certain percentage criteria for repayment of the debt. If we don't meet those criteria, what they'll do is call a reportable event. They'll report that information on what they call the municipal marketplace. It's a portal that anyone in here can go on. It's called EMMA, and it's the Electronic Municipal Marketplace Access. You go on and you will find every bonds that's issued by every state and local government, and that enables one, if they would like to invest in the city's bonds, to be able to look up information about the city. So what the SEC has said is, okay, if I'm a bondholder and you took out a loan with Bank of America, you have to report that loan. Currently, we don't. We don't have to report bank loans. And so the SEC said, well, we're going to change the rule to force you to report bank loans because we feel that it's unfair to the bondholders because you are on the hook for other debt that you're not showing. So that's basically what that rule is. We would like to increase engagement with other operating departments regarding their revenues and expenses. Essentially, we want to be able to make sure that in their normal course of operations, that they're paying attention to their revenues as well as their expenses. We know that at times their main mission is to provide service. So we want to be right front and center to say, hey, also you have to pay attention to the numbers, because the numbers, operations, the common denominator of your operations are dollars and cents. So we want to increase engagement with the operating departments to make sure and to point out those numerical indicators that may spell trouble or are spelling trouble. And then finally, we would like to conduct semi-annual training on accounting policies and procedures for city staff. So to quickly go over my budget, we have three main divisions: financial services, customer service, parking authority, and it's a slight increase. The bulk of the increase represents the ERP system, which we indicated earlier. Next slide. The operating budget for financial services, the ERP system, is the bulk of the changes. For customer service, we have a slight decrease. That simply represents decrease in postage, and the county bills some of the stormwater fees on our behalf, and our estimate there was a little bit aggressive, so we're decreasing the estimate for those costs. And parking authority, we've seen an increase there because of increased usage of credit cards, as well as we have to pay for what they call Way to Park app. Every time someone uses the app to park, the city has to pay a per unit fee. However, that's passed on to the customer. And so future considerations beyond fiscal 20, we have a GASB 87 lease reporting standard, and to cut to the chase, what that is we're going to have to show on the financial statements what all of the leases that we have. If we're the lessee or the lessor, for instance, the Pier Restaurant lease, All of those leases, we're going to have to show the total future lease rents as well as the total lease revenue expected from those transactions. We want to continue to decrease our OPEB liability. We're going to be engaging an actuary this fiscal year to look at the OPEB valuation. We would like to continue to explore linking customer databases for utility billing, business tax receipts, and fire inspections. And we'd like to deploy the deployment of employee self-service portal, and that's after we've implemented the payroll portion of our ERP system. And with that said, I'm available for any questions that you might have.
When you look at your FY20 goals, one of the things I think that's missing in there that should be in there is making sure that we address every single one of the items in the Joint Legislative Auditing Committee's report.
I'm right on board with you, Mayor. Yeah.
Apparently not enough to put it in the
definitely.
slide, but I'm glad. But that needs to be really reiterated with you, that this needs to be as part of one of the goals that's in there.
Yeah,
And
will
if
do.
our goal is to achieve that,
Okay.
is there a cost in achieving those goals, and where does it show up in the budget, and will it show up in the
There's
budget?
no cost whatsoever,
Okay.
and we're working towards that currently. Good point.
When it comes to the employee portal, what will that allow them to do? Is that the ability for our employees and the self-service portal to make adjustments for their, whatever they're claiming with their taxes? or anything like that?
Precisely, to reprint their W-2s. They won't be receiving paper copies of their payroll check vouchers. They could go online, reprint it. So that's our aim, to become paperless unless you have an actual physical check.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll have Information Technology Services. Namaka. Here.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, staff, and invited guests. My name is Ron McKenzie, and I'm here to present to you the proposed IT services budget for fiscal 2020. But first, I'd like to discuss some of our achievements.
Mr. McKenzie,
Yes.
before you get started,
Yes.
I don't know if everybody here know, but on national news the other night, just north of us, Rivera Beach, because of their lack of security, they had to pay $600,000 to be able to retrieve their information. And when I read it, I heard it first on news, but they also, I think, took over the entire 9/11 system. And you know, you came to my office, Mr. McKenzie, and I will tell you it was a tremendous presentation that you put on. Thank goodness that we have somebody like you, because the city of Rivera Beach is paying $600,000. They had no choice. They had no choice, or they lose all their information.
That's correct.
And I actually don't think they've got their information.
They didn't get it?
Not last I heard.
Not quite yet, plus there'll be $1 million in trying to correct the deficiencies, but yes.
Yeah. Thank you,
Let's
sir.
continue. Some of our greatest achievements for fiscal 19 were not planned, budgeted, or discussed at the fiscal 19 briefing. It dealt with us responding quickly and diligently to ever-changing compliance, mandates, and cybersecurity threats. These are some of the achievements that we had in the area of compliance. Mayor, you just spoke about the joint legislative audit findings. These were findings since 2016, and this year IT took an aggressive approach, and we were able to satisfy successfully and resolve all those ITS findings dating back to 2016. Another thing dealing with compliance was the American Disabilities Act. We worked with the team on a resolution which included conversions, training, installing Adobe Pro, and increasing awareness. This dealt basically with our website and with documents on our website, trying to make sure that they were compliant. There will also be obviously other things coming forward with the American Disabilities Act, because there's always different things dealing with compliance. But for that particular issue, we addressed it as a team. Also, payment card industry, or PCI compliance. We upgraded our Click-to-Gov online processing to make that capable, and now we are PCI compliant. As we speak to cybersecurity, last year we told you that we were going to do a cybersecurity audit, which we did. The cybersecurity audit that we did let us know that we needed to make some improvements, and to make those improvements rather quickly, and we did. We updated our firewalls. We had a phishing campaign, which sent out emails to everyone to see who would click on it. Many people did. We implemented training for staff, as well as for IT staff, to make sure that we were able to handle some of these things, these threats. We obtained new best-of-breed antivirus software, and we also obtained better monitoring tools so that we can see what's going on. As far as the network improvements, we improved our network. We completed 8 fiber upgrades. We still have 4 ongoing. And we completed an upgrade of our internet access. We now have doubled the bandwidth. In the area of software improvements and best of breed, others have already spoken to you, and you know that we've implemented OpenGov, we've implemented Laserfish, iLobby, which you see downstairs in the lobby now, and Cyber Reasons is that antivirus solution that we had, which was best of breed. There's also other applications that we have, but those are some of the keys that we implemented. In the area of training, as far as achievements go, we conducted over 50 training sessions in SharePoint, ADA compliance, ExecuTime, and in cybersecurity. We also like to thank you, the Commission, for allowing April to be Cybersecurity Month. We had 4 different classes, a class every week, and we were able to send almost all staff through that. So thank you for your assistance in supporting that and making that happen. Asset and inventory tagging. The interim manager told you about how we now are able to manage all IT assets. Everything is in one fund. We now are able to, we put inventories and tags on each one of those pieces of equipment, and we're able to see where they are, what's going on with that, and that's going to be very helpful now and moving forward. In the area of cameras, we put license plate reader type cameras in Sullivan Park, and we're also in the process of putting cameras in other city facilities. Our fiscal goals for fiscal 20. 1, in the area of cybersecurity, we want to obtain and deploy an analytic tool. A quick explanation of an analytic tool. An analytic tool, as opposed to something just simply coming in and telling you what's happening and us being reactive when something happens, an analytic tool does something like let you know, okay, at 12 o'clock, I keep trying to peek in to see what's going on. It's kind of like looking at somebody robbing a bank. Usually you don't just walk into the bank. You monitor it, and you monitor it day by day. And if there's something to show the same car there or that same person trying to do that, that's how you say, okay, something's coming in, and we block it. So it's not just an aggressive attack. It's seeing those people that are passive and trying to attack, and that's a kind of a tool that we're looking to. We also look to replace existing end-of-life firewalls and switches, and we budgeted for that. We also need to make sure that we stay abreast of training and awareness. We want next April again to be Cybersecurity Month, and we also want to continue to make sure that everybody's doing their training and everything. We thank you, Vice Mayor, for letting us be aware of that particular issue, and we were able to resolve it quickly. Thank you very much. We're going to continue to increase mobility. We now at a 70% as far as the entire city for mobility, mobile devices. Obviously, our goal is to get higher than that, to have everyone be mobile, but we're now at about 70%. The interim manager also spoke to you about our centralized computer purchase and deployment, being able to take advantage of economy of scale, et cetera. We already discussed that. We also talked about the ERP replacement project, which is coming. We know that that's going to play a major role for IT, for HR, and for finance, and IT is ready to work with them to lead the way in getting that replacement. We'll also be looking to replace and upgrade our backup system. As we spoke about with Riviera Beach, making sure that we consistently stay abreast and have a secure and sound backup system is extremely vital. And we will continue to do that, and it's something that we continue to monitor. Our backup system and hardware. And we'll continue our best-of-breed software development, or deployment, excuse me, not development, but deployment. Now for the numbers. The first thing that shoots out at you when you see the numbers is personnel services, or personal services, which is personnel services. And the interim manager already spoke to you about that. We do not have any increase in personnel services at all. It's just the way that that it's being budgeted and being allocated, but there is no increase. As far as operating expenditures go, you can see a slight decrease. We knew we had to toe the line and make sure that, we were able to we wanted to get some additional capital outlay, which happens to be servers that we're getting and switches that we're also getting that came to end of life. That's what that $145,000 was. So we had to try to find out different ways to do that. So we looked at how we do business. As the manager said, all departments had to do it. So we looked at how we do business, and we made some cuts in certain areas. In the area of network communication services, at the parks we had a chain of air cards that we were using for access, which wound up being extremely expensive. In addition to the chained air cards, it was also being monitored. We took that system out and put a copper line on that system, a isolated copper line. Wind up saving thousands of dollars a month, which wind up being thousands of dollars a year, which wind up coming up to a large amount of money, what you see here. So just finding out what we had and finding ways to do things better, and we took that over to other areas. Programming software. If there was software that we had that was redundant, that was doing the same thing, or that we were using in two different locations or whatever, we consolidated it and we brought things into practice. One of the things is in Boss Desk, different entities were looking for work order systems. We now are able to have PAM on Boss Desk, and we also have HR. So we're also able to use that just like IT does it. So we made some smart decisions, and we were able to eliminate certain things. Software maintenance. We looked at the maintenance on various different contracts to see what tools we were using and what tools we weren't using. If we were paying for something that we weren't using, we stopped. We told them, no, that's not something that we're using, so listen, we need to cut that particular item off of our particular budget. And by doing that and looking at the way that we do things, we were able to make also substantial savings. Minor equipment and hardware. One, we got a lot of the hardware this year that's needed. Next year, the hardware that we needed is capital outlay. So we were able to make some savings in that by being prudent this year. When it comes to hardware, it's not something that you have to buy each and every year. You kind of look at how you do things, and so we were able to take advantage of that. You see the line about computer equipment, and that's, as we said, you won't see that anymore for our department or any other department. That's why that fell in there. And as we talked again, our $145,000 for capital outlay deals with the backup server and network switches. Future considerations beyond fiscal 20. Strategic planning and appropriate capital fund for various IT mandates and compliance requirements. As I said, the first two slides in which we talked about achievements had nothing to do with items that we had budgeted for or discussed with last year. It had to deal with compliance and cybersecurity, dealing with other threats. So these are things that we continually have to look at strategically and say, okay, how are we going to budget for these things? It's a known unknown thing. We don't know exactly what it is, but we know when something comes, if a mandate comes, we have to react to it. If there's something that has advanced in cybersecurity, we have to be ready for it. So we need to strategically look at that beyond fiscal 20. Artificial intelligence, robotics, and LiDAR. Those are also things that are coming up in beyond fiscal 20. I want to tell you a little bit about LiDAR. What LiDAR is technology that allows light to measure distance. So light measures distance. So on cameras that are on streets and everything like that, it allows you to see overall a 360 from a high level position. How does that come in handy? We talk about autonomous vehicles and we talk about autonomous lawnmowers, etc. And when you see an autonomous vehicle, a vehicle which is not man-driven, driven automatically, you think about the vehicle going and you think about a 360 degree around the vehicle. That's not safe. And that's why when it came to Uber and stuff like that, somebody came out and they ran over the person, and we know what happened with that story. What you need to do is look above and see if you're going down the street and a ball is coming, LiDAR has that technology that's showing you what's happening all around the area. So a ball comes, and from that ball, usually there's a kid or something behind it. So it knows an action. And so the car will know how to react. stop. Let it happen. But as we look to build our streets on 10th, on Sample, on Route 1, as we look to build our streets, we need to make sure that we have conduit. So that way we increase our awareness with that technology. They're making cars with that technology. So that cars are able to be smart when they see things. Like, you know how cars, as you're driving, if it stops, you stop? That technology that says, okay, listen, if something's coming too close, back up. If you've got it on cruise control and a car's coming up, it'll slow down. That technology is the same technology used with that. And so we need to be conscious and think about LiDAR as we look to try to do autonomous things in our area. Improvements, disaster recovery setup. We always have to look at disaster recovery, what we're doing, especially with the new ERP system, to make sure that we're able to recover properly. GIS technology driving business and communications. GIS provides a visual indication for people to see various different things with improvements. They spoke before, Allison and Nicole spoke about a particular map that we have that allows for capital improvement. You're able to see all of the capital improvement projects, where they are, the location, how much they cost, et cetera, and it's a visual indication, really good map that we built. Again, when it comes to future consideration, education and training is always at the key, in the forefront. This slide shows a tool that we have, Boss Desk, and what this slide does, Boss Desk allows us to do a constant SWOT analysis, tell us about our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The particular ones that we measure are hardware incidents, software incidents, GIS incidents, mobile incidents, executive time incidents, network incidents, and general support. What it does is tell us where more incidents or issues are coming. And so we know to deploy more resources there. If it's new training that's needed, whether it's training for my staff and their recovery time is small, then we know I need to train my staff. If it's training for users with a particular software that we roll out or something, then we need to roll out that. And even if additional staff is using because we're not able to meet a service level agreement or being able to get people up in their computers and do their work or whatever, this allows us to do that. It allows us to do those analytics. And that's what this particular tool does. These particular stats show the different areas and how many tickets that we've gotten on those particular incidents. That is my presentation for today. Do we have any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes. Can we go back to the operating budget slide?
Yes.
Now, when we look at under the graph, there are some categories: network communications, programming software, and there's a dollar amount attached to them. Now, is that a savings?
A reduction.
There's a
Right, so savings, we had a dollar amount last year.
Mm-hmm.
We fine-tuned and saw what was going on, and so we were able to reduce the amount for that, so.
because when you add those up,
Go ahead.
it comes to over $250,000.
You're correct. These were key elements. These particular elements were key elements as far as reducing the budget.
Okay, so it's reflected in a reduction in the budget.
Correct. But then things were increased, like staffing for the ERP project was something new. Also, as you can see in the overall budget, overall staff for our department looks different but is the same.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, this is yours.
Mandy, you have a hard copy.
Yeah. All right, it's up. Sweet. Good evening. Amanda Robin, Chief Human Resources Officer. I'm going to jump right in and try and make us up some time. As far as our Human Resources fiscal year 19 achievements, we finished the employee handbook. I had to put that at the top. We are currently in training. I have 8 more sessions scheduled this week, and we should have the entire workforce trained. We did begin working on departmental SOPs, standard operating procedures, related to the handbook that are not actually covered in the handbook. Right now, we're working on the minor ones, things like dress code, things that are referenced in the handbook that need SOPs by department. We completed NeoGov training for our hiring supervisors. That's our applicant tracking system, so we're slowly training the hiring supervisors how to more utilize the system than what they were before. We were doing a lot of that. We're starting to train those end users to use it to its full capacity.
We revamped our new hire orientation, onboarding and offboarding. We started offering gifts when they come in so that they actually get something other than just a t-shirt. We actually have a formal presentation for orientation, and we actually implemented an exit interview through SurveyMonkey, which has allowed us to actually have more staff that leave fill that out, not nearly as many as I would like. Most decline it. We are hosting our 5th annual Employee Appreciation Party this year. This will be the last year that we host at Boomers, and I'll talk about that a little bit more when I get into my goals for next year. Happy to announce that we are actually about ready to likely make an offer for an HR payroll technician. It was an interview phase last week. We ended up with a solid candidate with a lot of payroll experience, so we're hoping to be able to make that offer this week. That actually relates to that joint audit legislating committee letter, so that'll fulfill that piece. Supervision and government training, we hosted on site. 25 of our supervisors were hosted in a 4-day, 8-module process for supervision specific to government, which is a little bit different because of collective bargaining agreements. We continue to host anti-harassment workplace violence training. That is required by your collective bargaining agreements. We actually host it and allow our employees to go the month of their birthday. They love that celebration. We also right now have out the RFP for employment screening services. That includes everything from pre-employment physicals, fit for duty physicals, background screenings, ACA, which is required by the Department of Active Aging for us to confirm that they have passed that screening, among other services that we use, random drug screening, those types of things. Next slide. The achievements for the risk management side of our operation, we successfully transitioned the health, life, and disability coverages to Cigna. We're actually very happy with their service right now. We have revamped the wellness program. We were lucky enough to receive $50,000 from Cigna for that wellness program. It's very specific what we can use those funds for. We also did a survey and addressed what the employee feedback was. They didn't enjoy the lunch and learns as much as we thought. They prefer the webinars. We actually received the webinars for free through the EAP program through Cigna. We also implemented a gift card reward program where employees that participate in a 5K and show evidence that they participated, they receive a $25 gift card. Same thing with if they receive so many steps within a quarter, so many active minutes within a quarter, they're rewarded with a gift card. We are getting ready to host biometrics on July 18th. They also will get a gift card for participating in that. We continue to process of integration of Naviline and Bentech to sync the benefits deductions. Right now it's a manual process. We anticipate that to be complete by the end of the year. We perform safety inspections to all city facilities, and we're currently training staff to perform those inspections, and we're at phase 1 completion, which means we have had 3 of our buildings where we have trained staff. What that means is looking at egress, ingress, making sure that there's no blockage, that there's proper storage, that there's not things stored in areas where they shouldn't be stored. And that allows us to not have to go out and do that. We'll still do it annually, but it allows for a better, safe work environment. We conducted a city asset survey. That means we came into all the buildings. We looked at what all of our assets were so that we're properly insuring the assets within the buildings. We implemented a workers' compensation procedure. It was not in writing, so it was informal and difficult for the employees to follow. We have implemented and have a completely finished procedure, and staff will start training the workforce in September. We do an in-house subrogation program. What that means is if you see where somebody hit a tree on Hillsboro Boulevard and the tree has to come out, we actually go to that insurance company of the individual that hit that tree and request that they reimburse us for the cost to replace that tree. That money actually goes to the department that paid to have it replaced, so that doesn't actually go into our budget. We just do the behind-the-scenes process. We've recovered over $22,000 so far, and we have just over $13,000 pending to receive. We implemented a city safety training strategy at no cost. That's through our insurer, FMIT. It's web-based. We've already implemented in 2 full departments, and I believe they actually have already completed theirs for the year. They were that excited about it. And we implemented a city safety committee. That's the committee that will review those trainings, look for safety hazards, look at trends that are going on, and help us to look at what happens especially in our operating departments that are out in the field, and assist in making recommendations. And on to goals. We want to create an employee communication plan to regularly provide employees with updates and reminders, education regarding their benefits, safety initiatives, and other HR risk policies and procedures. Right now, we do that through the email system. That works great for half of our workforce. The other half are in the field and don't have access to a computer as often, so we're trying to work on a better plan for that communication. We will be in union negotiations. Both contracts for PMSA and IUPAT are both up for reopener. The contracts expire 9/30/2020, the goal being that we're negotiating before they expire. We want to continue working on those departmental standard operating procedures. The HR department will actually be the keeper of all of those. So we will actually have a codification system so that we make sure that all of those have gone through the proper channels of review to include legal. We obviously want to continue to monitor the health plan design for opportunities that we can reduce costs. We want to complete our comprehensive review of pre-employment screening criteria by position. That varies. Maintenance workers in one department versus another department may not have the same level of background screening because of whether they interact with children or not. And so we want to have a full matrix of a breakdown to make it easy for any staff that come into HR to be able to follow and not just use institutional knowledge. We want to continue to revamp our new hire orientation, onboarding, and offboarding. We want to be able to partner with IT and some of the other service departments like Fleet that may give information and give equipment to employees so we have a better tracking system so that when we offboard, we have a better and easier way of collecting that back. We want to continue current training programs that we obviously have to continue by collective bargaining agreement, but offer additional training opportunities, things like ethics, customer service, things that we aren't currently training on. We want to implement an incident and accident procedure that's similar to the workers' compensation procedure that we wrote, but that has to do with outsiders or incidents that occur that don't relate to city staff, and we need to have a reporting for that as well. The risk management manual is currently probably from the same year that the handbook was, so our next phase is a risk management manual to be updated along with that handbook. And we do want to perform appraisals of all of our city insured properties just so that we make sure that they are properly insured. And on to the numbers. So for personal services, and I have these broken down by the two different areas. So this is just human resources. Personal services, we saw about a 2.5% increase. That's attributed to COLAs and merits. There is no additional request for personnel in this department on this side. Operating expenditures, we actually saw about a 30% decrease. I'm going to get into a little bit of detail on why we see that decrease. Programming and software, we saw a $13,000 reduction. The performance evaluation software that we talked to you about last year did not work for what our system is now. We may look at it again in the future, but it would not work for us, so we took that out and we did not proceed with that program. Legal fees, we are trending down on the labor legal fees. The handbook is done. I actually handle the negotiations with a team of city staff, and we review it after and all the language with the city attorney's office, which helps us with savings there as well. I said we were looking at a change in venue for the employee party, so we did a survey. We ended up with one vote over where they decided they would prefer a picnic over Boomers. We had already started the planning phases of Boomers for this year. We figured let's go get to that 5-year mark and then make a change, and we'll be looking with the committee to be planning a picnic for next year. The minor equipment, it's already been talked about a little bit where it was moved to central services. However, I did not contribute to that this year. Our computers were purchased this year and will be in warranty, so we will not be in that budget again until the following year. And other contractual services, we had $5,000 in there as we were transitioning with personnel, and we were going to be short a little bit. That was for temporary services that we will not need. We will be fully staffed next year. And then the risk management operating budget. So personal services is a 5.2% increase. Some of that is attributed to COLA and merit. The other is we are recommending a reclassification of the risk benefits coordinator to a higher level position. The incumbent in that position currently is doing a role that is outside of the class that they should be in. They're more acting as a benefits administrator than a clerical staff. And so where they're at and graded is not at the proper location that they should be. It's about a $3,000 increase to make that change. The reason for that and the concern for us is that if we don't make that change and the incumbent leaves, I'm not going to find somebody at her level and capacity to be able to take over and act as that benefits administrator. So we are looking to make that change for succession planning for the future. Legal services, this line item is actually not used by my department, but it is budgeted for citywide legal services. So that increase is based on the trending of that line item as it results to other legal services outside of risk management. Workers' compensation, medical, and legal, we are seeing increases in those. That has to do with older claims, not that we're seeing a trend of new claims. Obviously, we do have new claims, but some of our older claims are starting to uptick on the medical as those claimants become older. As for employee health, we had a reduction in the admin fee, but obviously an increase in claims cost. That's just the way that the market trends. Cobra Health, we have a decline in participants, so that results in a decrease in those claims costs. That's why we were able to show a decrease there of about 56%. And for retiree health, same thing, we had a reduction in the admin fee, but we do have an increase in BSO retirees, and that is both police and fire. So they're slowly starting to hit the age where they retire, and so those stipends we start having to pay based on their MOUs. So overall, the risk budget came in at 1.5% higher from last year. Most of that is attributed to those claims costs. We anticipated a much larger increase, but our claims actually trended better this year than we expected, so we were happy with that 1.5%. And then as far as future considerations, this is legislation that could affect HR and risk management in the coming years. So paid family leave, right now you're aware of the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, which allows for employees to be protected if they have a qualifying event that allows them to be out on that. The legislature is looking at possibly making that a paid benefit, where right now it is not. So we're keeping an eye on that. That could have a huge fiscal impact for some, for those that do not have their time accrued. For employees that have accruals, they're being paid out of their accrual banks. Sexual orientation and transgender discrimination, it's not currently a protected class. There is legislature out there making that a protected class, so it's something we're watching more for training purposes than anything. Use of prior salary. There's something that's going on through legislature about not being able to request prior salary of people that you are interviewing. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in Florida for government with the Sunshine Law, because you can still request that information even if they're not required to give it, but it's something we're keeping an eye on. And the last is just the FLSA regulations that you're probably hearing about, where they're looking at changing, what that level is for exempt status for overtime. Looking at our pay plan, we don't have a problem. We actually are above what that rate is, so we should not have to make changes based on that. And that's everything I have for you, unless you have questions.
Yes. Any department in the city that is responsible for, let's say, a department head, and under that department head there are X amount of employees, do the city have in place a program where everybody knows exactly what the goals and objectives are for a year? In other words, do you sit your employees down and say, okay, this is where we're going for the year?
Oh, I definitely do. I
Okay,
can't necessarily speak
does
to the
everybody
other
do that in the
departments.
city?
I don't know.
Okay, I think that's something we should know. There should be a vision that tell our employees, if I'm a department head and I have X amount of people working under me, here is our goals and objectives. They should be clearly defined as to where we're going to go, and we look to achieve this for the year. And when they do that, and the city looks good, we need to compensate them. I think we should have something like bonus checks for our employees. When they do an outstanding job, we ought to be able to say, the city was able to exceed overall expectations. I think every department head should have a vision cast within that department, relayed to the employees, and when that is achieved, then we ought to be able to compensate our employees, like I say, in way of a bonus check.
If I may, Commissioner,
Go ahead.
just in terms of, does every department have goals, and is that communicated to the employees? Talking about the budget and the programs and services that each department is budgeted to provide, looking at the goals that they have in the budget, their major, FY20 goals, like Amanda's FY20 goals that she has, those are in the budget. And then from there, you have your performance measures, right? So your performance measures are, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, or we're going to reach this obtainable goal this year, and we're going to measure it. And generally speaking, an employee or employees are responsible for that particular function within the department. Additionally, you have within the employee evaluations, goals and objectives for each employee that they're supposed to obtain for the next reporting, by the next reporting period, or at some period within that reporting period. So there are goals and objectives throughout the organization. I mean, from the strategic plan to the budget document, to the performance measures of each department, to the evaluations that each employee gets. There are goals. There are obtainable, measurable, SMART goals for them to obtain.
Well, my thing is that I think that within the city, that every department head, people that are responsible for other people, ought to have a meeting, probably, perhaps at the beginning of the year, to say, here's where we're going. This is what's expected of you. And if we're able to do those things, as we see that they're able to meet expectations, then I think that we should celebrate our employees, lift them up, and you did it. And I'm again, I think that JM Family gives a bonus check for the very reason of which I just said, because people stay at a higher end and they look to do good things for that company. And I don't know that we are getting the most that we can get out of our employees. I think if we do a better job of communicating, challenging them with expectations, and then when they actually meet those expectations or exceed those expectations, then we ought to be able to reward them.
You mentioned that we have different levels of background checks.
Correct.
Let us assume for a moment I'm checked for being an auto mechanic that has no contact with children. I re-educate myself, I'm now being promoted to a department that does. Do we do additional background checks on those employees, even though we may be with the city for 8 years and have an excellent record?
So yes, we do. We actually are letting employees know that in our handbook training right now. So that actually is one of our slides. And two, that's part of the comprehensive analysis we want to do, is not just because of a promotion, but which of those employees we should be periodically testing, not just upon hire.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have any questions for you. I'll just piggyback on what Commissioner Preston said. I think that's why we have a merit system. As far as bonus checks for employees, that's part of they deliver on their job and they're based on their performance. I know we're having issues with that, and we're reevaluating that on how we determine how that works. I would prefer to see that. JM Family is a for-profit business. Government should not be operated as a for-profit business. So I think the measuring stick on that's a little bit different. But while I agree that I think our employees are very well compensated compared to the private sector, but if there's going to be any bonus checks or anything like that, I think it needs to be within the merit system, and now when we get to revamp it.
And I can agree with that, but appreciation is appreciation. I don't think that everything has to be centered around money. I think a lot of times in employment, people just want to know that they're appreciated. And when they know they're appreciated, they will perform better for you.
I just wanted to follow up, pardon me, piggyback off Commissioner Parnas, is if a prospective applicant is being offered a position with the city, why are we not doing the full background check regardless of whether they're interacting with children or not? I think that should be required across the board.
Some of it has to do with the cost associated. Oh, there we go. Some of it has to do with the cost associated with it. Some of them, there is legal requirements where we can't necessarily test every person for everything because of case law that's out there. So there's usually legal reasons for it, but then the cost of a level 2 background versus a level 1 is a significantly different cost. So you would see our budget skyrocketing if we did that for every applicant that came in. So
Not every applicant, just those individuals that are being offered the position.
well, that's what I mean. If we did that with every applicant that we offered a position for, and then they decline the position. I mean, we currently have, I think right now in the works, 40 vacancies that we're working through. So that would be 40 individuals that we would be paying that additional fee, where maybe only 6 of those actually need that level 2 background.
And what is the cost between 1 and 2? What's the difference roughly?
I don't know if I know that completely offhand. I'm looking to see if Karen actually knows it offhand.
Anywhere from $50 to $75.
For the level 2?
We have legal criteria based on the percentage of time that they spend with children in certain positions.
You might have to come up to the mic, I'm sorry. Karen oversees all of that, so I don't want to misspeak. I'd rather her speak to it directly.
No, but as she's walking, $75 seems negligible to the safety of the residents, so.
Obviously, we will take direction from the commission on that, but also the attorneys, because there will be some legal issues with some of that, so.
Where we can do it, yes.
So essentially what happens is we have criteria based on law and the percentage of time that individual is in a certain position and their exposure to children and or elderly. So depending on their job description, which is the basis for determining the pre-employment screenings, that's where we work backwards to see what's applicable for that particular job. So if someone is not working with elderly and they're working as a recreation leader with children, that check would be slightly different. Or if you have someone that's at the water plant who has no exposure to children and or the elderly, then based on their job description, there's no legal reason why we should be screening them for that particular criteria.
Okay, I mean, I'm one of 5, but I would think, or explore the option of throwing those job descriptions out the window when doing the background checks and going by what the legal requirements are.
There are legal requirements.
There are legal requirements where some we can't because of what the law says. So that's what we would have to look at, is to see if legally we could even be able to do that rather than just fiscally. But we can definitely look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again. Way up here. As Dave previously spoke about, the Budget and Performance Management Division now has, or department now has 2 divisions, so we're going to split it up between the Budget Office and Purchasing. So, this is the overall budget of the department, and we will speak on them individually. Just making sure. Okay. For the Budget Office, our FY19 achievements, we basically revamped the budget process and found ways where we can make improvements. This year, we gave formal training to the departments for the budget and CIP, how to prepare them, what categories they should use for certain types of expenditures. For the CIP, they basically started from scratch and we revamped the forms. So they really had to think about some of the things that are coming up in the next 5 years. We also did zero-based budgeting and had the departments use the priorities for their budget justifications in the system. With this, in past years, departments would look at whatever their budget was last year. This year, it was, what do you need to operate? We're not really looking at last year as much. We did use it for compare, but it was, we're starting from 0 and going from there. So we really took a hard look at every single line item that the departments submitted to us. In addition, they used the priorities where it was a 1, 2, or 3. A 1 was something that was required in order for them to be able to operate. A 2 was something that would help them, and it was an improvement to help them operate. And a 3 was something that, you know, it was almost like the wish list. Like, this is something we would really like to have, but we could get by without it. So it helped us a lot when we went back and had to make cuts to the budgets in order to balance. So it was just a different method than before. As I spoke earlier, we improved the capital improvement process and updated the CIP development forms. When you get the CIP this year, it's going to look very different from the book in previous years. It has very specific, detailed information that the departments had to provide in order for it to be submitted as a capital project. We also helped IT develop the computer replacement program, and as you all know, we implemented the OpenGov financial transparency portal. For fiscal year 20, our goals are to create a comprehensive budget manual, not only for our internal staff in the budget department, but also for our external users, which is the other departments. We'd also like to expand the budget training for the departments. As Nicole spoke earlier, we would like to implement the OpenGov strategic initiatives and performance measures module in order to provide quarterly reporting for goals and performance measures. And as always, one of our major goals is to receive the GFOA Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Here's a breakout of our budget comparison from 19 to 20. Really, the major thing that we have is that we added the strategic initiatives tracking and performance measures portal, which was a $34,000 increase. But if you take that out, we actually reduced our budget. The increase was only $23,000. Okay. Future considerations beyond fiscal year 20. As Nicole spoke about earlier, we're going to be looking at the strategic plan and how we can expand our strategic initiatives, and we're going to have to implement the visioning sessions. We'd also like to utilize long-range financial planning for budget purposes, where you're looking at what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years based on trends of where we're at, economic indicators, and once we get it all set up, we can use it year to year to help us plan for the future. Other things we have to look for is adapting to new reporting requirements. State legislature just passed where we have to submit specific reporting indicators to the Office of Economic and Demographic Research. Some of them are the government spending per resident, the debt per resident, the average employee salary, the percentage of budget spent on salaries and benefits, and the median income within the city. I'm assuming that this is so they have a comparison. They have other information that we have to submit, like the annual financial report, which is basically after the CAFR is approved, we submit financial information. You go on their website, you can compare other cities. So I'm assuming that this is for that same purpose. And also, we have to keep up with the ADA compliances because we have a lot of documents and we have to make sure that it's ADA compliant. So, next is Evie.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. My name is Ivelsa Guzman, better known as Evie. I am the purchasing manager for the city, and I'm happy to report our FY19 achievements. Okay, very good. We hosted our third annual How to Do Business with the City Vendor Outreach event, which took place on November 8th, 2018. And I'm very happy to report that we had over 100 vendors participate in the event. Additionally, we implemented quarterly training for procurement code and P-card, and we had over 50 staff members participate in those trainings. I tested for the certified professional buyer, public buyer certification, and I'm anxiously waiting on the results of that. We submitted for the Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award by the National Procurement Institute, and I wanted to tell you that this is the first time that the city enters for this award. This award covers an array of criteria from ethic and policy, internal user guides, performance measures, compliance with city code, public access registration for vendors in solicitation documents via the webpage. So I'm very happy for this. And I also anticipate getting that award very soon. We set up also an Amazon business account And with that, that has helped us to stream online purchasing. We have also tied the Amazon business account to a Smile account. And a Smile account is a simple and automatic way to support your favorite charity every time you make a purchase. And with that, we're getting a bonus 5% of all the purchases. And our charity of choice, of course, is our Center for Active Aging, which is the Northeast Focal Point CASA. Okay. Our FY20 goals is to increase the P-card rebate, of course, by monitoring purchases to ensure procurement policies are adhered to. We plan to increase participation to the annual How to Do Business with the city vendor outreach event. And how we plan to do that, by the way, this event is scheduled for Thursday, November 14th of this year. We plan to do our increased marketing efforts by visiting local vendors and hand-delivering flyers to the local vendors to maximize the participation. We plan to increase staff professional certification by allowing our staff to participate in the NIGP, which stands for National Institute of Governmental Purchasing webinars, seminars, and conferences, in addition to FAPO, which is the Florida Association for Professional Procurement Officials, conferences and seminars. We would like to implement an employee training for evaluation committee participants and also a spec writing class. And this will be beneficial for those who are responsible of creating scope of works for our solicitations. We would like to create an employee procurement code manual, which is in the works right now, and we hope to have it complete soon and available to all employees in our SharePoint library. Okay. Our operating budget, as you see, there is really not much change. The operating expenditure were reduced by eliminating the minor tools and equipment line item, as well as our travel and training budget was reduced, and other minor small reductions across different line items. For future considerations beyond FY20, we would like to continue to develop and enhance the procurement card program by paying city utility bills with the P-card, for example, the Florida Power and Light bills. We would like to continue to seek ways to improve internal controls by separation of duties, offering adequate training to staff on various procurement topics, perform self-evaluation for internal controls, and for the inclusion of procurement best practices. We would like to increase staff resources to industry standards by adding 2 positions, which will be a buyer position and a contract administrator. The current industry standard ratio is about 10 to 15 solicitations per buyer per year. Our city is currently operating at about 18 solicitations per buyer per year, and that's if I include myself in the equation. If I remove myself from the equation, our buyers are producing about 25 solicitations per year, which is a higher average than standard average. Lastly, with the city's procurement needs on a steady increase, the addition of these 2 positions will allow us to increase the quality of service without sacrificing the quality of service to both our internal and external customers. With that, I thank you very much.
You initially said,
Go ahead.
you initially said that there was a zero-based budgeting. Is that what the city use? What type of budgeting do we use for the city? Is it zero-based?
This year it was a zero-based budgeting model, yes.
Okay, but then when we were talking about operating budget, she said line item. Did you say something? Did you?
Correct. So if last year our office supplies line item was, say, $500, this year was reduced to, say, $200. So that's what I mean by line items.
Okay, so it's not that we're using the line item.
No,
So
just,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, so all the expenditures reside in some line item in the budget. Operating, like Evie said, office supplies, minor tools and equipment, contractual services, they're state-named line items that you have to put every single expenditure in.
When you look at the different budgeting process, why is the zero base the best? I mean, what advantage does it offer versus any other?
I don't know if it's the best, but for this year, I think it was the best option for us, considering that we made many different changes to the budget process as well as the budget itself. And so to look at the budget from a zero-based budgeting perspective, I used this term earlier, it allowed us to kind of reset the budget.
Okay. And I don't know that I really understand it like you guys understand it, but in the zero-based budget, are you just spending money as the need?
No. So what it is instead of, for instance, let's just say Evie had $1,000 last year for office supplies, so we're giving her $1,000 this year for office supplies. Regardless of whether she spent $1,000 or not, she may have spent $500, she may have spent $1,200. So that would be, unfortunately, a more typical look at a budgeting process in government. But a zero-based budgeting model says, no, you have $0 and you're going to tell me exactly what you need and what you're going to spend it on, and then we'll talk about it and maybe I'll give it to you.
Question. Physical items. That's a physical item. This is a physical item. What percentage of your purchases are done by bid, and what percentage do you use county or other vendors to set a price to buy items?
So, do you have that information handy?
I don't have it.
No. We do have that information, Commissioner. We do track how many competitive solicitations we put out, how many cooperative contracts we take advantage of, how many are maybe a sole source. We have all that information. I just don't have it tonight.
Okay.
I can provide that to you. I can make sure
In
Andy
another
gets it.
lifetime, I was a bid broker in New York. I did several $1 million a year with both the federal government and the city and state of New York. And we had a bid room about the size of this room in the city of New York with clipboards for items, whether it be signs or microphones, nuts and bolts, didn't matter. And anybody was able to come in and get a copy and bid on it. You won the bid, you got a contract for, let's say, 100,000 rolls of aluminum foil, of which I represented Kaiser Aluminum. Maybe I made 4 cents a roll, but 100,000 of them to do paperwork, and it was shipped to the city warehouse. So I learned a little bit about it, and every item the city took in was tested to make sure that if it was supposed to be 100 feet of aluminum foil, it wasn't 99.9, it was 100. I'm wondering if we operate on a similar basis, or do we rely on the county or other units to do the bidding, and we just take their best price?
That would be a cooperative procurement arrangement. We do use that. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's not the only tool. We do competitive solicitations. We do small dollar quotes. We do a whole plethora. Like I said, we do have that information. I can get that to you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
I think that's it.
Next, we have Public Affairs and Marketing. I'd imagine that there's at least a picture or two in this one.
Puppet show. While we're waiting for Rebecca, I know we've taken kind of a zero-based budgeting approach in the past, but I think what's interesting about this year is what you did. You've actually truly zeroed it out in the ranking and the analysis that you did on it. really adds the value to it in determining whether or not it was needed. So that really appreciate that approach.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. How are you tonight? My name is Rebecca Medina Stewart, and I'm the Public Affairs and Marketing Director, the department that we like to call PAM. Everybody refers to very endearingly. Tonight, we're going to start with our fiscal 19 achievements. Just double-click it. Thank you. 2019, some of the campaigns that were completed, marketing and advertisement campaigns that were completed this year, one of those was the very well-known and very lengthy DFB Recycling 2.0. We're smack in the middle of the straw-free DFB campaign. The hurricane preparedness, we did a month-long hurricane preparedness campaign, and the annual Alert DFB campaign. We also presented to the community spinner the CCAM, who is the name that we gave to our underwater camera, and of course we have the campaign for the Launch Code program that is coming up in July. We expanded the live streaming initiative to the DFB apiary and are in the process of testing some visuals for that location. Additionally, not sure if you guys got the memo, but tonight we are streaming live on YouTube. You can watch it from your mobile phone, you can watch the workshop, this workshop from your desktop or your iPad, whatever it is you want to watch it on. We're streaming live as we speak, and we are giving more thought and consideration to different opportunities where live streaming can be utilized. It is the way of the future. It is what a lot of municipalities are not doing, and I like to think that we are one of those municipalities that likes to think a little bit in an innovative way. We have several hours of video already in the can for the new Deerfield Beach Blue Nautical webpage. This page on our website will contain education and video of the different reefs located in Deerfield Beach, to include the overturned Rapa Nui that we all remember well, Mount Deerfield, the separated rocks, which are basically where the mooring buoys are located, and also the first, second, and third reefs, which are essentially reef tracks located in depths that range from 30 to 90 feet of water just off the coast of Deerfield Beach. This year, we also acquired our Google listing. This is the listing on Google that appears when visitors or residents search for Deerfield Beach online. It's sort of like a hub that allows customers to quickly find every kind of information in one place. This helps us with numerous things, like higher online visibility. Our listing will be what shows up in a Google search map, increase web traffic, and increase engagement with our customer. And we also designed the new Deerfield Beach Fish Guide as an extension of the underwater camera. This new page, this is a new page located on the city website, and it's a list of fish that have been spotted on the underwater camera. There has been a lot of engagement and a lot of activity on our YouTube page, and this was something that the public actually asked us for and actually contributed to. So there was a lot of engagement directly with the public, and we were more than happy to make this happen. We launched that page on April 2nd, and currently we are averaging about 1,400 views per month on that, but we expect that to climb very quickly. Also in fiscal 19, we rebuilt the beach cam system and brought the entire operation in-house. My 3-person team handles all of it: maintenance, repair, we watch it, we move the windshield wiper when it gets stuck, all that really fancy, glammy stuff. We are currently live streaming all 3 beach cameras on our YouTube platform. That is new for us. And that is actually a game changer for us, and I'll speak to that in just a few more minutes. The Ricky the Recycling Ranger educational campaign won 2 international marketing awards. presented by the Association of Marketing and Communications Professionals. And we streamlined our internal request process for increased efficiency and performance monitoring. And we use this for everything from tracking press releases to web support. And I believe you heard Ron McKenzie refer to it as Boss Desk, and that's the same program that we're using. Well, here are just a handful of projects or events that got a new look this year. Among those are the Cultural Committee, Festival of the Arts. We've rebranded the 4th of July. The recycling campaign is noted on there, parts of it, and we gave Festival of the Arts their 40th anniversary new look as well. Growth of all social media platforms continued, with Facebook seeing a 17% increase in followers. Currently, we're at more than 17,500 followers. Instagram saw a 32% increase, and we're currently just over 3,200 followers. The Instagram number, the 32% increase, that's a pretty good number for us. Instagram is something that we definitely will need to watch and grow. And I'm going to speak to that in a little bit more depth in a few minutes, because this is the platform that targets millennials and Gen Zers. That is a target group that we have not hit yet. I believe we've hit a really great, sizable portion of our community with our Facebook page. But Instagram, if we want to get the Gen Zers, if we want to get some engagement going with millennials, we have to really tap into our Instagram page, or our Instagram handle rather, and really invest some time and money in that. Instagram, as I mentioned last year, is a newer platform for us. It hasn't been around as long for us as the Facebook page has. YouTube is a game changer among our social media platforms. Since March of this year, we've seen over 264,000 total views and more than 4.6 million total watch minutes. And that is just the underwater camera. All three of our cameras, of our beach cameras, are currently getting a lot of hits. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, last weekend with the Guinness Book of World Records that was out there, the beach cleanup, we had people talking to each other, chatting on YouTube, and they were going back and forth from the pier camera to the underwater camera, watching what was going on overhead and then under the water. So there's a lot of engagement within the community, chatting with each other also on those chat pages. We are consistently, and this is, we love to brag about this. We are consistently in the top 15 to 20 most watched animal cameras in the world right now, which is a huge deal if you know how popular the animal pages are on YouTube. Fiscal 20 goals. This year, we're planning to research some potential revenue opportunities for YouTube, specifically advertising on YouTube. We've just recently hit the subscriber number required to be eligible for advertising, but there's a lot that we need to learn about that, and so we're definitely planning to dig into that and see if we can make that a revenue source here in the near future. We're also planning continued expansion of our live stream initiative. We're working on expanding the live stream to the DFB apiary at the end of the year. And we're also taking a look at some additional locations for potential cameras and live stream opportunities. The completion of the Deerfield Beach Blue Nautical page is expected to happen in spring of fiscal 20. The Deerfield Beach art, well, actually, this is exciting. With the artificial reef coming here shortly, this summer, actually, we are expecting to begin the planning stages, the marketing plans, social media calendars for the DFB artificial reef marketing campaign. We'll probably see that more than likely in the fall. We're also planning to finish the design for the e-commerce online merchandise store. That is something we are in the process of right now. That's a really tricky, complicated little item for us as well, and there's some additional research that has to be done with that. But we are expecting that to be completed by spring of fiscal '20. One of the things that we definitely need to think about doing quickly is to start looking into obtaining a new Deerfield Beach app. Currently, we have an app through our Civic Plus platform, which is the host of our website. The app has very little capabilities. It doesn't offer us much, and it doesn't offer us a lot of opportunities to fix it, upgrade it, change the look of it, any of that. And as it stands right now, they have old logos on there, and if we were to fix it today, it would pull us or remove us from our place in the App Store. And Civic Plus just doesn't have a fix for it. So I do think we need to think about a different option for a city app, something that's easy to use, easy to design, and engaging for our residents. Streamlining communication. This is something that needs to be done to improve the efficiency of our communication process. And we're looking at simplifying or even eliminating unnecessary tools this year. When I first arrived here 6 years ago, there wasn't really any process in place, so our biggest goal at the time was just to pump information out, just to get information out to the public, flood the public with information from email blasts to the beginning of social media, website alerts, all that good stuff. But a lot of those things that were working once upon a time are not working as well anymore. We're not seeing any growth in some of the numbers for some of these platforms and some of these tools, and so we do need to take a very specific look at our toolbox and just eliminate what's becoming obsolete and eliminate what is no longer growing. The Under the Pier, this is exciting actually. We are excited about designing the Under the Pier merchandise line. This was another thing that went into our little thought box with respect to engagement with our residents. With the popularity of the underwater camera and the contribution of pictures of fish and every kind of fish that you can imagine, we are going to create this year, this fiscal year, a line of clothing at the Deerfield Beach shop that has one or two of the most popular fish, either on a rash guard, on a baseball cap, on other swag that they can purchase at the shop. And we are going to ask the public to choose what that fish will be, or those fish will be. So that is planned for this fall, and we're hoping to have that in the shop by the fall. We're also needing to begin the branding process for more than just a pretty beach. We adopted this as our tagline a couple years ago, and we haven't really focused on branding that. And so we are going to start putting our baseball caps together, our thinking caps together, to start thinking of different ways to do that. But it's definitely something that we need to brand, and we need to do it very wisely. So that is part of the goals for next year. Our operating budget. In personal services, we saw a 5.5% increase. In operating expenditures, we saw a 41.6% increase for a total of a 12.1% increase overall, which leaves my total budget for fiscal '20 at $504,227. The majority of that jump came from the maintenance account that's being brought under the Public Affairs and Marketing Department this year. That was always under the Parks and Recreation Department. It was a line item in their budget. but we are the ones who are spending on that. We are the ones who are handling the maintenance and the fixing, and so it was a decision was made a few months back to move this line item under my budget. And that's about a $20,000 increase. The other increase is about a $25,000 increase and that is for social media management services. You'll see in my future goals, and I'll mention this in more detail. We initially thought about bringing on a full-time social media coordinator this year. Fiscally, it wasn't feasible, and we wanted to take a look and see where this person or how this person might actually add to what we do. As you all know, social media is becoming, it is a 24/7 job. We have an overwhelming amount of responsibilities with social media. We do it on our weekends. We do it on our nights at home. It is a tool that you constantly have to engage with. And so instead of bringing on a full-time body, we thought, well, let's see if we can get some services in, see how that fits into our plan, and then we can probably take a look at the budget next year and see how we proceed that and how we move that forward. For future goals, I mentioned that we definitely need to think about bringing on a full-time social media coordinator or specialist. And there's good reason for this. There's misinformation and disinformation, as a lot of you well know, is spreading further and faster than ever before on social media. It even outperforms verified content. This can generate concern and confusion with our constituency. It reduces trust in our organization. It disrupts attempts to communicate our attempts to communicate factual messages effectively. Not only do we need full-time engagement, but someone who's dedicated to pushing out factual information to the public around the clock for the purpose of keeping the public educated on the facts versus rumor, innuendo, and hate campaigns. Social media has evolved in the past decade at a very fast rate. We have to evolve with it. More investment in video production, content storytelling to promote the Deerfield Beach brand needs to be done, and an investment, in my opinion, in social media influencers. By the end of next year, the influencer marketing is on track to become a $10 billion industry. The rise in influencers across all social networks, but especially YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat. It literally just highlights how the millennial and Gen Zers generation are embracing influencers wholeheartedly. These are influencers in every industry that use social media storytelling to create communities. Because of this, brands can work with influencers to expand reach and bring about greater engagement with your community. And finally, future-proof staff. The fourth industrial revolution is very much upon us, and I don't mean to lecture, but we need to make sure that we future-proof our staff in the Public Affairs and Marketing Department to excel in this digital age, and continuing education is going to be vital to what we do in our department, and budgetary dollars obviously will definitely need to be set aside in order for us to meet this goal. Questions?
I got one. First of all, I do appreciate everything you and your staff does. I mean, you guys are at the point of the spear, and I really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about what this social media management services does. $25,000. I'm just curious what that will do for your department in the city.
That's like a contractor rate, essentially. They would come in, they would probably, on a full-time basis, on a part-time basis, work our social media strategy with us, do a lot of scheduling for overnight posting, holiday posting, help us to really develop a foolproof strategy for for better proofing the way that we handle social media. In addition to that, I think some coaching as well would come with that. And that will just help us to streamline that whole process. I mentioned earlier that we were talking about eliminating some tools. We're definitely looking at doing that with one of our social media tools that just isn't growing. But we see growth and potential in other platforms. And so, and we don't want to keep adding to a toolbox that's already full. So, there's no doubt that there's going to be another platform out there soon enough. I just want to make sure that we're on the cutting edge of how we use it and that we're just being really efficient with it.
If I can, quite honestly, with the evolution of what we've had with the social media at this point and the amount of time that it takes, it has added a whole new dimension to Rebecca's office. She could probably use a full-time staff, but I want to explore. I told her, let's just see what this looks like first. Let's test the waters with contractual services and see if that will
Take some of the load off.
yeah, take some of the load off, and then we'll go from there.
Mhm.
Thank you.
The things that you have done on social media is reaching far beyond what you're showing here. I have people call me all the time, and they'll tell me, especially the underwater cam. The other day on our pier, there was caught a 40-pound African pompano. And, yeah, I mean, it was incredible. I have the picture here. And he said, you know, you guys do a lot of good things over there. And these people, a lot of people from Miami, they live up, they said they check out our pier. They said, but you don't do anything for the fishermen. And I think we ought to take this thing to the next level. So I think what we should have, one of the things we should consider doing and act on it, is a fishing pier tournament and live stream it. And if we do a tournament, let's say 2-3 day tournament, and the winners, you know, get a chance to whatever we decide that we'll give them, but bring them before the commission. And I'm going to tell you, if we do that, that pier is going to be packed. That pier is going to be packed if we do, and nobody else is doing it, and nobody has done it. So we would be the first to do an annual fishing pier tournament, and we push that, and it will actually be a source of revenue for us. And then invite the public to come out and see the guys fish, watch them fish. It could be a good time for everybody.
And last, but certainly not least, the city clerk.
You're fine.
They have a full print. Okay.
Do you want to use that or this?
Hold on, I'm trying to see if I have my notes. And I don't.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present the City Clerk's budget for the next fiscal year. I'm going to start with a brief, I'm sorry.
You're not fooling us. We know you're not that soft-spoken.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest. My throat, I've been, battling like this little cold, so if I talk too much, my throat dries up. So just be aware of that. I'll have to slow down a little bit. But I wanted to go ahead and just give you a quick overview because in the interest of time. So first we're going to start with our achievements for the fiscal year 19. Enhanced staff education, municipal election update, indexed records, and cross-train clerk staff. With our staff, we have started to do annual trainings for public record laws. And the reason for that is because as the laws change, we need to make sure that our employees are abreast of those changes. So what we do with the annual training is we provide do's and don'ts for records. We help them understand, what is required when someone requests a record, and helping them, giving them the knowledge to understand that no one has to provide a name, they don't have to provide an address, written notification, they only need to give you a verbal confirmation of what they request. This helps us to avoid any exposure to liability, because we've had in the past where people will come to City Hall and they will try to talk to employees just to see if they were aware of the laws from Chapter 119, which is public records. An update about the municipal election. We had our election this year for Districts 1 and 2, and it finished successfully because we actually had a reduced cost from the supervisory elections, as well as all candidates turned in their termination reports with balances on both of them. For indexing records, what that references is our document storage. We have a facility, a vendor, IDD, and they store all of the city's documents. Indexing the documents actually allows us to search for those documents when we get a request from a different department. So let's say HR wants to get a termination file. They give us the name of the person who was terminated or resigned, and we search our records to identify what file it's in. We contact IDD, and IDD will in turn send us that file. The importance of that is knowing that every time a file is pulled from the shelf, we are charged. The city is charged. No matter how many files it is, you're charged for each file. You're charged to retrieve it, and you're charged to return it. So once we had all of the boxes indexed, it actually decreased the amount of charges we were receiving. Additionally, we have over 600 boxes that are stored with IDD. Lastly, cross-training clerk staff. This is an achievement because anytime you call the clerk's office, no matter who's in, if I'm there or not there, if there's a question that needs to be answered, we're able to answer it. And all of the staff have been trained on 4 specific programs. One is Laserfish, which is for document retrieval. The second is Type VNC, which allows us to post any postings, updates to the televisions in the lobby. The third is Civic Plus, which allows us to make postings to the website. And then finally, Just FOIA, which is for all of our public record requests. Now, with public record requests, we have received in fiscal year 18 over 3,000 requests. It was about 3,100, and out of those 3,100, 3,000 were fulfilled. So it is important that all of our staff is aware of how to research those records. If someone calls in to say, I'm trying to find out, where my record is in the process, they're able to go in to review and identify exactly where that particular request is at that time. Next, our fiscal year goals. Now, our primary goal for this fiscal year is the addition of a record specialist. In fiscal year 18, we received a lawsuit because our meetings online were not closed captioned. Since then, we've been able to close caption those videos, but now we're also seeing that there's a trend for having forms also be ADA compliant, as well as our documents to be remediated. The difference between the document remediation and creating forms that are ADA compliant is that we can actually do the forms in-house using Adobe Acrobat, and with training from IT, it's not as difficult to do as the remediation of the documents. That requires more skill, and it requires more training to do those. And we also want to increase our public record training and document retention to twice annually. Reason being, as I mentioned before, not only because of, avoiding lawsuits, but we had a recent training, and in April, it was facilitated by the city attorney's office, and we only had 39 people show up. So that's not a lot when you think about the size of our staff. We plan on making the training mandatory for the next fiscal year, and we're also going to offer 2 trainings, 2 for public records and 2 trainings for document retention. Next, thank you. Thank you. Next, we have our operating budget, and this just outlines the administration and election budgets. Of course, we won't have an election in 2020, so there is no funding being allocated to that line item. As far as the administration, we're seeing just a small decrease. I'm sorry, no, that's an increase. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a 1.2% increase to the budget. And then on the next slide, it outlines just the administration portion. So you're seeing personal services with an increase of $94,000 at 25.1%, and that's due to the addition of the record specialist. And we also have a great decrease in operating expenses based on the agenda management software decreasing by $20,000. The reason for this huge decrease is we've been using Granicus since 2007. And Granicus has given us something that no one else was able to offer. Their program does a lot for the commission as well as city staff. It's easy to use, but now their customer service is not up to par, and their prices have increased dramatically over the years. So this year we paid Granicus a total of $35,000. The service that Civic Plus is providing through City Clerk is $15,000. So we're receiving the same services for much less money. The storage space rental is also decreasing by $10,000. The reason for that, as I explained, since we've been able to index all of the files, it's easy for us to find files, and we're only receiving bills even with them storing over 600 boxes of ours, our bills for them are roughly about $300 a month. So it's very minimal because the indexing really did help out a lot. Other contractual services is being decreased by $28,000, and this is only possible with the addition of the record specialist. If we have the record specialist, we will be able to eliminate the contracting services for transcriptions. We have a vendor. They actually attend the Community Appearance Board and the Marine Advisory Boards. They attend those meetings and they transcribe meeting minutes for those. With the addition of the record specialist and the elimination of that service, all of clerk staff will proceed with going to those meetings once again. Now, for future considerations, with ADA compliance and accessibility, I just wanted to remind you guys of the importance of the forms, being able to create those forms in-house. Anytime a new employee would come in, the record specialist would work with our IT department to facilitate the training, and all the employees would be able to make forms that are ADA accessible through Adobe. And document remediation, I currently have included in the line item budget $15,000 for document remediation. I'm working with Civic Plus because there is not currently a vendor who offers these services. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to partner with another vendor to start offering document remediation for different municipalities. For the 21 municipal election, we'll have 3 seats coming up. District 3, District 4, and the mayoral seat. I'd like to start offering the financial reporting software, which is currently offered through Broward County. I actually was at a meeting with them last week, and they are offering the software to all of the Broward County municipalities. If we join in, the cost for that program is $4,000 as a startup, and then the yearly will be $2,600. What that does is it allows the candidates to present their reports in an electronic format. In the past, I've had, scenarios where someone will come and they'll say, well, my report is, I can't get my deputy treasurer or my treasurer to sign the report because they're out of town. And we would simply take the report as incomplete and wait for them to amend the report and send it in. So with that, you would be able to actually send in your report using a PIN number. Everything would be done electronically. And it also, warns you against any issues that you may have in your report, any type of miscalculations. But then there's a separate program through VR Systems that will allow you to, well, it's another cost. It's $2,400 annually, but that is only if the city is not able to, get other cities to piggyback. What that does, it actually tells the elected official if they're, breaking the law, so to speak. So if you were to go in and put in a campaign contribution for cash and it was $100, it would flag you and say, no, you can't, this is not allowed. So it's things like that it'll help the candidates, but it'll also help the city clerk's office, because not much time will be spent trying to assure that the documents are done correctly, which I do spend quite a bit of time on that. So it would really help out. And then for fiscal year 22, it could be a combination of 21 and 22 for the charter amendments. I was able to look at a lot of different, sections in the charter and in the code. We haven't had some of our charter updates have not been done on certain things since 1979, believe it or not. One thing in particular is the names being placed on the ballot by lot selection. Many of the municipalities only do it by alphabetical order, which is according to the state statute. So that would be one thing that you could look at changing, but that would be something that would have to go to the voters since it is in the charter. Another thing is our qualifying fee. Our qualifying fee has been the same since 1979. It's $100. And I did a brief poll of other cities in the Tri-County area. A lot of them are charging different rates. So you'll have some that are charging higher for the mayor, who has a higher salary, and lower for the commissioners. Then you'll have some that are charging actually 5% as a filing fee for the total salary. The lowest one that I found was down in Miami. Their filing fee is actually $10. So it's up and down all the way, but most of them are charging either $100 or higher. And like I said, it's percentage based. So that would be something that could be changed, and that could actually be changed by ordinance. And the last thing that I noticed was in our current, it's chapter 26, there is qualifying by petition. How it lists it is alternative method of qualifying, and it outlines, it just says that you can qualify based on chapter 99, but it doesn't tell you what chapter 99 is about, and there is no link to chapter 99. So it is actually qualifying by petitions, and what happens with that is the person would take the petitions and they would go from person to person and say, would you support me being on the ballot? And if they supported the person, they met the recommended number of, if the number of voters were approved by the supervisor of elections, then their name would be placed on the ballot. Okay? And lastly, I just wanted to say, I know that Dave's been working really hard to reduce the budget, and because the commission wanted to reduce the millage for the employees, for the residents, sorry. Working with Dave, we've had the opportunity for him to see what my department does, and even though he's been trying to reduce the budget, he's still kept the record specialist in so that I could get a chance to explain it to you, because he does understand the importance of it and what we're trying to do to avoid, any liability with the city. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I got a question. Okay, your record specialist, that's where I'm going. What percentage of that is salary? What percentage of that is benefits?
I don't have the percentage, but I can tell you based on the dollar amount that we budgeted would be roughly $50,000 to start, and the remaining was benefits.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't think we need to change the fee. I think $100 is not astronomical to file. I didn't have to borrow to file when I ran. And secondly, I think you run a great office. You've kept me out of jail when I was a candidate. I made a mistake once, and I'm duly submissive for the beating I took. You run a great office. I really appreciate the help as a candidate and as a commissioner. If it ain't broke, why fix it? I like things the way they are here in the city rather than go through the county. It's not that difficult to turn the reports in every month.
Oh, I'm sorry, the reports would not go through the county. I am your supervisor of elections for municipal elections. They would still come to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they would come electronically and that would cost us $2,500 to be able to send it electronically instead of coming to the office.
No, it would cost the city. The candidates wouldn't pay any.
No, I know that.
Okay.
I'm now a commissioner, so
Right.
what the city's expenditures, what would be the benefit for $2,500, except two candidates, or in this case, two candidates and the mayor submitting expense reports once a month? Do we need to spend $2,500 to do it electronically?
Well, I can tell you whenever there's a mayoral election and the two other seats are up, you have maybe 5 candidates running for the mayor's seat. Sometimes 2 to 3 for District 3 and District 4. So if you have a total of 11 reports, okay, so just imagine 11 reports every month until February, where you have 3 reports that are due. With that, it's going to take a lot more time because of the small staff that we do have. It takes a lot more time for me to have to go through each report to verify its accuracy, and then to turn around and tell you if you made a mistake with any of your calculations. So it's not only a time-saving measure, but it also helps with accuracy, and it also helps when people are in a pinch, when they can't sign the report physically.
Okay, so it helps your office more than the candidates.
I would not say that. You can ask Commissioner Preston what he thinks about it.
Well, the reason I'm saying this, it would be easier for both if it were electronic.
Yes.
Okay,
And
fine.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to put Commissioner Preston on the spot, but I say that because he and Commissioner Hoover are recent.
It's okay.
They're recent, so you guys haven't gone through that in a number of years. So since they're recent, they know, what was endured during the process.
Okay. Has it changed so much in the last 2 years?
Calculations can always change, so every year I make sure I go through the Florida statutes to make sure
Okay.
that contributions and all of that are still the same.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The addition that you're looking to do for the record specialist, you also said, though, that the savings in the contractual services would go down about $28,000. So that would come off that dollar amount that would cost us for the specialist, is what you're saying, right? Okay.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. At this point, I'd like to open it up to the public. Thank you very much. We have a podium over there. If anyone could come up, and need your name and address for the record, please.
Gwen Clark Reed, 1430 Southwest 6th Way, Deerfield Beach. Mayor and Commissioners and city staff, thank you very much for your presentations this evening. I'm going to be very brief because I do have a couple of questions for you. First of all, in the presentations, it would be helpful for, I think, the residents who don't have the packets that you have to have the glossary at the bottom of each page if there are acronyms there on that particular page or something that needs to be explained. I would appreciate that. Going to the automatic pay on the e-billing, how will that information get out to the public? And how soon will this be happening? On the IT, I think you said something about lighting. What was that term that you used?
LIDAR, LIDAR.
LIDAR. I hope LIDAR can also help us with the chickens, so that they'll be identified on the road if something is going on. The gift cards, who's going to be paying for those gift cards when, I think that's in Amanda in Human Resources, who pays for those gift cards? And I didn't see anything in the budget about the audit that has been talked about over and over in the city commission meetings. I didn't see any mention there of a cost or how that was going to be handled. I'd just like to know something about that. I want to go to the live streaming, and this is the first time that you say we've done it. Is it going to be possible to live stream the city commission meetings? Is that a possibility? I'd like to have some feedback on that. And thanks very much to the city clerk to say that we need to look at our charter. We really do. There's lots of other things other than what you spoke about that need to be changed in that charter. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Glenn Sullivan, 2377 Deer Creek Trail, Deerfield Beach, Florida. Again, thanks to the staff for putting those presentations together. They are helpful. Just a couple of comments, probably on the budgeting side. First, revenue collection should be planned as expected to be collected. And I've noticed, at least on this year's financial management reports or financial reports, as well as past ones, that that doesn't necessarily happen. For instance, ad valorem is collected during the first quarter, primarily, yet the revenue plan shows an equal amount over the full 12 months. So it's broken into 12-month increments and peanut butter spread. But that's not reflective of reality. And why is that an issue? Well, if you break it out over 12 months, but your first quarter is where you get it, it will hide or mask any other revenue issues if you're just looking at the total revenue being brought into the city. Whereas if you plan it based on expectations, if in the first quarter you don't collect the expected revenue for ad valorem, for instance, it will show up. So anything that you can schedule specifically on revenue or on expenditures should be done that way, because it also serves as a schedule to see if things are being executed per the plan. Second one, this is specific, well, not specifically, I'm going to use the example of the current budget, the 19, with the financial management, the monthly financial reports. So cash carryover and unfunded encumbrance have driven planned revenues unrealistically high. So we're two-thirds of the budget. We're through two-thirds of the budget as of the last monthly financial report that was posted. And $8 million was shown as encumbrance carried over from last year, but yet zero has been budgeted. Zero has been actually placed in that account. So $8 million elevated the expenditure or the revenue expectations, which also increased your spending. Again, it's 1-for-1. Revenue equals spending. So the more revenue you put in this plan, the higher you can project spending. Well, $8 million of encumbrances from last year at two-thirds of the budget year with zero money funded, there's a problem there. It was either overestimated, or there wasn't that money to bring from 2018 to bring forward. I'm not sure what the answer is, but if you look at the financial report throughout, you come up with about $8 million of encumbrance, and zero money has been placed in that budget. And the same thing with carryover. $13 million was projected as carryover, and yet again, zero has been carried. So that's $22 million of revenue that was used to create spend plans. Now, if that $22 million revenue is not there, you've got $22 million of spending that you can't do, and that throws prioritization and everything else off kilter. So I really think that staff and the commission should look at how carryover and encumbrances are elevating our revenue projections. And if it makes sense, then do it. But I mean, two-thirds of the budget year and you haven't funded any of the encumbrances, there's a problem there, if you ask me. So that leads me to ask, can residents get a score sheet of the capital projects planned for 2019? These were shown in the capital improvement plan, and I assume that the current year, the budget year, those improvements should have been put in the budget. And what has actually been completed? So we have a list of capital improvements. What have you done? It's a good scorecard. I haven't seen it. I can go into the capital improvement plan, but typically I cannot find maybe 50% of those things in that monthly financial report, and that's the only tool the citizens have. So if we have a way to look at budget versus spending, and if it's even put together on one list of capital improvements and what's being spent, that would be helpful to us, and I think it would be helpful to you. Same with grants. I know that there's typically a charity grant list, but that is not inclusive of all the grants that are given, such as the Pack-a-Rattlers, the Bisons, the Economic Development Council, and probably more. I don't know. But we don't have, the citizens, I have not seen a consolidated list of the grants the city is giving out to businesses, nonprofits, charities, or whatever. And then on the slides comparing 19 to 2020, are the 2019 numbers the budget numbers from the 2019 budget, or are they based on current expenditures? Because sometimes you're going to underspend and sometimes you're going to overspend. If you're purely looking at last year's budget to this year's budget, it may not tell you the whole story. And then I would, again, suggest, especially if we're going to have an audit coming up, that the commission should look at an internal auditor that reports directly to the commission. If we're going to have a internal audit, that would be the time to have this auditor available, and then they can go audit the systems throughout the city on a yearly basis and report directly to the commission. Again, thank you.
Dan Commissioners, 330 Southeast 19th Avenue. I want to thank the Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, and the city staff for allowing the public to speak tonight, and I'll try to be very brief. When you increase the fire assessment fee, initiate the stormwater fee, have another 7% increase in property values, it's disappointing to only project a 10 basis point decrease in the millage rate, especially with the extra homestead exemption not passing and almost $2 million being freed up in debt service from the general fund due to usage of the interest reserve. Everything regarding the budget is interconnected. If the commissioner saw the actual increases in salaries, benefits, and especially health care costs over the last 5 years, you would have the necessary information to see why there was no money for the capital improvement projects. In the past, it's been necessary that when trying to get a figure for the increase in salaries and benefits, you really have to add up all 31 categories in the budget to get the actual number. And if the $36 million bond was spent more wisely, you could also fund some of the $11.6 million in capital improvement projects. I have a few just specific questions from the presentations tonight. The 6.8 increase in property value, wonder if you have the figures of how much is from existing properties being reassessed at a higher rate versus how much from new properties coming on board. And also the 4.1 million increase in public safety, you covered $2.6 million of the increase, and I'm curious, is the remaining $1.5 million contractual increases? A couple more specific questions. I know there was a big medical case where our stop loss kicked in recently. Have we received that money yet? And where does it show up in the financials or in this budget? And were there any changes in the procedure for signing and approving the payroll action forms? And just one final comment on recycling. I think our enemy here is waste management, and we shouldn't lose sight of that they're a monopoly and they've put us in a very bad spot. And when you hear Mr. Gressick's presentation about either adjusting rates or service levels, I think there's the option of just explaining to people that when your fees go from $11 a ton of recycle in September to next month starting $75 a month to recycle, I think they'll understand that and understand that the villain here is waste management, and if we can keep collecting the metals only, it may be the way to go here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going to close it to the public then. Mr. Santucci, do you have some answers to some of the questions that came up?
Sure. In terms of the auto pay, I think we still need to go through the procurement on that, so we're definitely several months off, but we will market that to all of our billing customers to ensure that they are aware of that additional option once we get that. The gift cards to employers are only specific to the wellness program, and wellness dollars are used for that only. And in terms of the audit and the funding for the audit, at this point, I have been in contact with the Joint Legislative Committee on and getting their assistance. They've been quite helpful in getting an understanding of the services that they can provide and at what cost. And it looks as though we'll be able to initiate that this calendar year, actually this fiscal year, and the costs associated with that, frankly, there may not be any. So we're looking at that and exploring that with them. The City Commission meetings are live streamed, so you can always go to the city's website and you can watch those. I don't think they're on YouTube live streamed, but they are live streamed. They're not on YouTube. Correct, they're not on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I was trying to write so fast with Mr. Sullivan, I'll be honest, I don't know what his question or a comment. So if there's specific questions of his you'd like me to answer, I'd be happy to do that.
I think it was a score sheet regarding the capital improvements was the question.
Okay, so with the capital improvement, the CIP will be released with the budget, and we're actually working, a lot of the stuff that Nicole talked about, the storyboarding will provide us the ability to show the progress of our CIP projects through OpenGov, and we are working on that. Obviously, she's just, at this point, trying to get up the performance measures, and that'll be the next action that she takes after that.
Okay.
In terms of which properties are reassessed, and I don't have that information. I think that might be available with the property appraiser. All the public safety information related to the increases will be provided on June 25th. Mr. Hurst, Mr. Dunkley can show you this chart that might be helpful to you in terms of understanding the net new taxable value estimate for the city. And there's a question on stop loss that I'm honestly not familiar with any new stop loss cases, and the PAF form has not changed.
Okay. I think that was everything. I believe that was it. I just want to say this, everyone likes to talk about government running like a business, and I understand that to an extent, but we have to keep in mind this, that, there's a belief, and I strongly believe it, that, not everything that is profitable is of social value, and not everything of social value is profitable. And, things like gambling, pornography, that's profitable, but it's not of social value. And if we were the military or the fire department or anything else, and we are having to sell any kind of wares to get people to allow us to be able to provide those services, if you ever thought you're going to make a profit in that area, you're mistaken. And quite frankly, I think we should be prepared to, if you do it right, you're going to be prepared, and people expected that if you had a department that wasn't profitable, that you were going to have to shut that down. Really, if you're doing it right, you'd have to shut down every single department, because we shouldn't be making a profit off the taxpayer. We should be bringing enough revenue in to be able to cover what our expenses are, and that's what a lot of people are short-sighted on. They talk about, well, you've added this, you've added that. That allows us to prioritize certain projects that are a definite need, and it takes away the opportunity for those projects to potentially be given a lower priority when it comes to budgeting. Having a dedicated revenue stream to do things that are essential makes sense and allows for us to specifically focus in those areas. But we had a little rough start with some of our technical difficulties here tonight, but excellent job as the interim city manager and getting us started on this. And the one thing that's very different about this is not a wish list that comes in which we had the opportunity to cut and chop and talk about it later. You're essentially presenting your budget early to us, giving us the time to digest it and look for any changes and take public input on it and determine where changes can be made. So it's an interesting approach, and it's appreciated, and you all did a great job. So thank you. Any other comments, Commission?
Yes. When I listen to all the different presentations, I'm just cautious and a bit reserved, because you're thinking about the residents and you're thinking about this, the way that the city is run, and you don't really want to make a mistake. But quite honestly, I can't sit down and talk with or know what you and Hugh knows and some of the others about budgeting. I just don't know that. I don't deal with it on an everyday basis. And so it boils down to a couple things with me, and that is, does spending equal revenue, and does revenue equal spending? And then, as we were talking about the vision with some of the departments, I think are we actually spending money as we plan? The money that we spend, is it for what we really actually plan? And in doing that, how do we prevent an overestimation of anything associated to a spend plan? How do we stay out of trouble? And I think it can be very difficult in many ways, but it can be very simple in some ways, in that all of us here who have a home or have a business, in order for that home to run well, you have to have a budget. And when that budget gets off, it can be very tough. And some things you can do sometimes that can make things kind of confusing. And I remember President Bush was in a debate one time, and they were giving him all of these numbers, and he said just simply, the math is fuzzy. And sometimes it's fuzzy math. And I just tend to be very cautious. So, my thing is, is the spending equal the revenue, and does revenue equal spending?
Thank you. With that, looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.